Betrayer of the Alpha. A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Rain Hart. Chapter 1. The Blood Witch in Chains. The wind cut like razors across the scorched snow trail, but Seren Val didn't shiver. Her skin had long since lost the luxury of reacting to cold. Her soles, bare and flayed raw, left no blood in the snow anymore, just streaks of black where the nerves had surrendered. The manacles around her wrists had grown warm with her feverish skin, and the iron collar, the one wound with runes of suppression, memory bleed, and the royal seal of Ashrend, chafed with every swallowed breath. Still, she didn't cry. She counted. 1 step. 2. 3. Her chains dragged like broken ribs across the frozen ground, trailing sparks against the rock as the snow thinned. Behind her, soldiers laughed. A little slower, witch. The wolves can't see your face while you're crawling. She'd look prettier on her back. Doesn't bleed red, though, does she? Filthy, cursed blood. A rock thudded into her shoulder. Another nicked her temple, sharp and fast, and warmth bloomed down her cheek. Seren did not flinch. She didn't so much as turn her head. She counted. 4. 5. 6. The wolves on either side of the trail were not animals. They were men, cloaked in fur, heads hooded, eyes gleaming gold with contempt. Clan-born of the Ashrend fortress, sworn to Damon Rhask, they stood in clusters with stones and curses in hand, eager for the taste of a spectacle. Burn her again and see if she screams. She didn't last time. Seren had knelt for 2 days in the Ember courtyard and never made a sound. Her silence had only enraged them. 7. 8. The cold had no mercy, but neither did she. Mercy was for the healed, the forgiven, the buried. She was still alive. At the crest of the hill, the land opened to a shadow of jagged peaks, and there, carved into the black basalt cliffs like a wound, stood Ashrend fortress. The gates loomed like the mouth of a beast, iron-studded and red-veined with frozen rust. Smoke poured from the upper watchtowers, and the sky churned with a storm not yet born. Seren's knees buckled. Not from weakness. From something else. A scream of sensation burned from the base of her spine to her skull, a pull as if her very blood had caught fire. The chain at her throat flared, red, then white-hot, and every mark carved into her bones ignited in tandem. She collapsed forward, palms hitting snow, convulsing. Inside the fortress, in the tower of black stone that never thawed, Damon Rhask staggered. He had not slept. He rarely did. But this pain, it was not his. Not entirely. Not anymore. It twisted like a phantom blade beneath his sternum, and his hands clenched around the edge of the stone hearth beside him, cracking mortar. He knew what it was. Who it was. She's arrived. The last time he had felt this echo, he had been 10 years old. Bound in fire. Biting his tongue to keep from screaming as the witches carved truth from his marrow. Now the pain was not in his body, but in hers. And still it lived in him. Outside the gates, Seren coughed blood. The iron collar constricted, and the blood spilled from her lips in thick ribbons, staining the snow black. Her head bowed, but she did not weep. She bit down on her tongue until the copper pooled in her throat. She counted. 9. 10. 11. Open the gates, came the command. Heavy groaning. Screaming iron. The doors to Ashrend parted with glacial slowness, revealing its garrison. Soldiers stood in formation, some with spit frozen on their lips, others with gloved fingers twitching on their weapons. At the top of the stairs, framed in snow and shadow, stood Damon Rhask. He wore no crown. He didn't need one. His cloak was wolf hide, thick and obsidian, trailing frost as he moved. Golden eyes burned beneath a brow furrowed with years of silent wars. There was no softness in him, just precision. Just fire carved into flesh. He descended the stairs slowly. Not because he was curious, but because the fire in his ribs had not gone out. Seren raised her head. Her vision split, not just from pain, but from the overwhelming weight of him. Even before he spoke, she felt his will wrap around her throat. "Bring her to my tower," Damon said. His voice was colder than the wind. "Do not remove the chain." The guards hesitated. One of them, younger than the rest, looked from Seren's bleeding mouth to Damon's steady gaze and seemed to pale. Still, they obeyed. Seren did not struggle as they hauled her upright. Her knees gave once more, but she caught herself. She would not die here. Not in the snow. Not under his eyes. Not yet. Damon didn't move to help her. But as her body passed near his, the pain surged again. It was fainter this time, but real. Echoing. Like the heat of a distant star reflected in bone. He turned away before the tremor in his hand could be seen. And Seren, lips cracked and skin raw, smiled faintly through the blood. Because she had felt it too. They burned. Together. Chapter 2, The Alpha Who Wouldn't Flinch. The stone scraped her spine. Seren collapsed onto the icy floor of the dungeon, the cold seeping into her already bleeding skin like a second sentence. Her knees struck first, bone to stone, no resistance. The guards didn't spare her a glance as they shut the iron bars behind her with a resounding clang. Chains still coiled around her neck like a serpent, humming faintly with the blood seal spell that tethered her to this cursed fortress. The darkness pressed in thick as smoke. The only light came from the phosphorescent veins of magic running along her sealed collar and wrists, pulsing crimson, then flickering silver, as if undecided whether to silence her or consume her entirely. She didn't cry. Her throat was too torn for it. Instead, she folded herself carefully into the corner, each movement calculated to avoid the spots where skin had peeled raw from the long march. Her breath came in shallow tremors, every exhale fanned with heat that wasn't hers. A fever was building. Or maybe the curse was. She couldn't tell anymore. She focused on the stone. Cold. Real. Unmoving. Count the cracks. 1, 2, 3. The pain struck again, searing along the blood-forged chains like a whip. Her spine arched against the floor, fingers clawing at the runes scorched into her skin. The seal was misfiring. Or someone was triggering it from afar. She bit her tongue until blood flooded her mouth. And then, like a shift in wind before the snow falls, she felt him. Not saw. Not heard. Felt. The air changed with the faintest tremor of intent. A heavy silence walked in before him, thick as judgment, shivering through the bars like a whisper of war drums. Seren forced her eyes open. Bootsteps. Steel-shod. Even. Too even. She didn't need to see his face. She knew. Damon Rhask. The Alpha of Ashrend. The Executioner Prince. The boy who'd once burned his name into the snow with a scream. He came alone. No guards. No advisors. Just him and the cold, as if he had nothing to fear in the company of a chained witch. She watched his silhouette descend the last step. Shadowed cloak. Tall, broad frame. Controlled rage crackling at the seams. His golden eyes gleamed through the gloom like wildfire kept barely at bay. "Get up," he said. His voice didn't rise. Didn't thunder. It sank. Seren flinched but didn't obey. She couldn't. The seal was tightening again, its pulse mimicking her heartbeat, erratic, choked. Her lips parted to speak, but nothing came except a guttural gasp as her chest seized. She curled in further, arms around her middle. "I said," Damon repeated, "get up." I can't." Her voice cracked like frostbitten bark. "It's burning inside." He moved. Too fast. A blur of shadow and heat. He was suddenly crouched before her, one hand gripping the chain around her neck, the other steady on his knee as he leaned closer. His presence overwhelmed, crowding the tiny cell with power so thick it tasted like ash and winter. "Stop," she rasped, eyes wide. "Don't, come closer. Please." "Why?" he said, soft, cruel. "Does it hurt?" The chain pulsed again. A spike of magic surged through it, his doing. Testing her. Toying with the limits of the seal. She screamed. It wasn't just pain. It was memory. Heat behind her eyes. Fire beneath her skin. A child's sob echoing in a dark hall. Chains dragging over stone. The smell of flesh and scorched fur. And then, she was there. Not in her body, not in his, but somewhere in between. A half-formed vision. A hallway drenched in red. A boy no older than 10, naked but for ash and fear, being dragged by the wrist across glowing coals. Keep walking, a voice snarled, deep, regal, monstrous. You bear my name, Damon. Walk like a Rhask. Seren's mouth parted in horror. She knew this pain. But it wasn't hers. No, Damon's voice snapped, breaking the vision like a whip. That's not for you. That's not your memory. He shoved her back, hard enough to make her skull crack against the wall. The chain slithered from his grip like a serpent escaping the flame. Seren gasped, shaking violently, eyes wide in a mix of terror and something else. You were a child, she whispered. Don't speak of it, he growled, standing sharply. His breath came heavier now, not from exertion, but from something deeper. Some buried thing clawing at the edges of his control. You burned, she said, voice trembling, because someone made you. He turned away. Not out of mercy. Out of fear that she'd see too much. She didn't stop. The pain was loosening her tongue. Or maybe it was the echo still singing in her blood, pulling secrets from both sides. You've worn chains longer than I have, she said. Haven't you? His shoulders stiffened. Shut up. I felt it, she whispered, like a child trying not to cry. You flinched then, Damon Rhask. Not now. He turned back slowly. The fury in his gaze should have incinerated her. Instead, it faltered. Because she wasn't taunting him. She wasn't smiling. She was curled against the stone wall, bleeding from nose and lips, shivering as though each heartbeat might splinter her apart. But her eyes, gods, her eyes, held no pity. Only the unbearable quiet of knowing. You carry more pain than I do, she said softly. And I was meant to be a weapon. His fists clenched at his sides. I should let the seal finish you. You won't. Why not? Because if I die, she breathed, this pain dies with me. And you're too proud to suffer alone again. He stared at her for one long, ragged moment. Then turned away. At the door, he paused, knuckles white where they gripped the frame. Behind him, her voice came one last time, barely a whisper. Your pain is heavier than what I've carried. And I've carried war. Silence. Then, footsteps retreating up the stairwell. When Anne arrived at dawn to clean the cell, she found Seren unconscious, curled around the stone as if trying to hold herself together with nothing but bone and breath. Blood stained the floor beneath her like a vow. And the Alpha's scent lingered longer than it should have. Chapter 3. Her body remembers the fire. The cold silver rattled like laughter. Seren lay still on the marble floor of the tower's second tier, skin flushed from fever, lips bitten bloodless. Her wrists were shackled with null silver, that cruel alloy that snuffed out spirit channels and punished even the twitch of resistance. The chains weren't taut, they dragged. Wherever she was meant to go, she'd arrive humbled, skin scraped, body bowed. And stood above her, expression tight but unreadable. The High Alpha's orders. You are to be cleansed. Seren flinched at the word. Cleansed. 2 guards flanked her, rough hands grabbing the cold links like they were leashes for a beast. The moonbath hall and added. You'll be scrubbed until the marks fade or your bones do. As they began pulling her down the corridor, Seren managed a breath. It won't work, she whispered. And didn't answer. But her knuckles whitened on the door latch. The moonbath hall was bathed in silence and alabaster. The walls gleamed with obsidian-veined moonstone, and above, pale skylights fractured silver light onto the pool in shards. Steam swirled, but it wasn't warmth that hung heavy, it was expectation. Ritual. Punishment, cloaked in elegance. Seren's feet dragged along the whetstone. She hadn't been granted shoes. The guards pulled her to the edge of the water, unshackled her ankles just long enough to strip the thin linen shift clinging to her. She tried to cover herself, but her wrists were still bound, so the attempt looked more like supplication than modesty, and stood at the head of the stairs leading into the water, expression finally cracking. She looked tired. "She's marked too deeply," and murmured, almost to herself. "Order stand," said one of the guards. With a sharp jerk, they forced Seren to her knees. The silver chains spilled after her like leeches. She descended into the water under duress, the coldness biting despite the mist, stealing her breath as surely as the shame did. Her skin barely submerged before it began. The fire. Not in the room. Not in the water. In her bones. She gripped the rim of the stone pool, head thrown back in agony. Her eyes clouded, not just with heat, but images. Not her hands, but they moved like hers. Not this hall, but a forest drowned in red light. Blood on her palms, a chanting circle around her, wolves howling with split throats, her voice lifting. "I accept the bond. Let the fire mark my name." Her scream echoed back from 15 years ago. Seren collapsed into the water, barely above drowning. The blood moon, the contract, the moment she offered everything for survival, the moment she cursed her soul to this hunger that gnawed at her every time she closed her eyes. It came back with the scent of burning fur and the taste of iron on her tongue. When her lungs demanded air, she clawed upward, soaked hair trailing behind her like ink in the water. But she didn't stop crying. The sobs tore loose from her chest like something feral trying to escape. Her arms were crisscrossed with glowing red latticework, the curse script, ancient and foreign, crawling like vines beneath her skin. And stood frozen. One of the guards, Halleck, stepped forward, face pale. He turned and left without a word. Minutes later, he was in the tower's highest level, boots echoing up the spiral stone. Damon Rhask did not often look away from the northern wind. But when Halleck entered, his gaze dropped to the reflection pool nestled in the balcony below. "She didn't just scream," Halleck said. "She remembered. The blood moon. The incantation. The mark." Damon didn't move. "She's not just a bond sharer. She floods." Damon's throat bobbed with a swallow. "Explain." "She sees backward. Not just what she lived, but what was done to her. As if the memory forces itself out." Halleck hesitated. "She said the fire in her blood was hers. Not ours. Not yours. Not the gods. And yet it burns through your mark." Silence. The Alpha's hand was clenched on the stone railing. His jaw, immovable as a carved statue. But a vein pulsed near his temple. Below, Seren had slumped at the edge of the water, pale back shivering in the moonlight. The cursed sigils still glowed beneath her skin, even as the waters tried to coax them away. But they clung, etched into her. Proof of the unclean. Damon watched her like a man cursed to relive the same vision. He didn't say he hated her. He didn't say he wanted her erased from his sight. Instead, he whispered, "Her soul is on fire." "But why? Why is that fire the only thing I feel when I breathe?" He did not wait for an answer. Seren stirred as the chains were reattached. The cold bit again, but not as deeply as the memories had, and knelt briefly beside her, and for once, her voice softened. "I saw what you saw." Seren shook her head, dazed. "No one should see that. But he will. If this keeps happening, he'll drown in your fire. Then he should stay away." Anne's lips thinned. "He can't. Not anymore." Seren blinked through the mist. "Because of the curse?" And rose, expression shuddering once again. "Because of something worse." She turned, and the silver leash snapped taut once more, dragging Seren toward whatever tower chamber awaited her next. Above, the moon dimmed slightly, as if even it dared not bear witness to what the fire remembered. Chapter 4. The Thorn in His Spine. The Ember Keep was built high above the storm line, a place where no howl of wind nor scrape of blade could intrude. Yet within its obsidian walls, something far louder raged, something no stone could contain. Damon Rhask knelt in the dead center of the meditation circle, the dark sigils etched around him pulsing with emberlight. His breathing came in short, tight bursts, each inhale a battle against the scorching thrum in his veins. The scent of smoldering ash clung to his skin like a fevered second layer. His bare hands trembled against the floor. The spirit-binding array beneath him flickered violently, its runes crumbling one by one. "Anchor it," he snarled. "Yes, Alpha." Rhett's voice was brisk, sharp with panic. The officer hovered near the door, clutching the control plate with both hands. "But the core's destabilizing. Your spirit pulses too." "I said anchor it." Damon's control snapped with the force of a shattering blade. His head whipped toward the officer, gold eyes glowing feral. Rhett flinched, then tapped the panel again. No response. The array shrieked under Damon's pressure, black cracks splintering across the stone. The silence that followed was brief, brittle. "Bring her." Rhett froze. "You don't mean..." "Now." Within minutes, footsteps echoed up the tower. 2 guards emerged, dragging Seren between them. She was barefoot, her pale shift damp from the purification hall, silver chains still dragging from one ankle. Her skin bore faint tracings of the moon bath, runes that never faded fully. Her lips were bloodless, her eyes hollowed but defiant. "She's still weak," one guard offered, hesitating. "She's breathing," Damon said. "That's enough." He rose. His presence filled the space like smoke, suffocating and slow. Seren barely managed to lift her gaze. "Not again. You'll stand in the circle." "I can't." "You will." His hand shot forward, gripping her arm and hauling her inside the collapsing array. The moment her foot crossed the perimeter, the runes flared white-hot. The sigils devoured the floor around them, reshaping, adapting. A new circuit completed. A new binding formed. Damon inhaled, and for the first time in hours, the fire inside him dulled. Relief tasted like blood. She swayed on her feet. "You're using me." "Yes." He didn't bother to lie. Her presence calmed the rage, steadied the jagged current gnawing at his mind. But it came at a cost. The shared tether flared. Seren jolted with a cry. Her knees hit stone. Damon's brow twitched. It was happening again. She was remembering. And he was seeing. The scent of iron choked him. In the vision bleeding into his mind, he saw a forest altar soaked in blood, ropes of thorned vine cutting into pale skin. Her skin. A hooded priest. Chanting. She was 13. Barely more than a child. Her arms spread wide, the vines holding her open like a sacrificial bloom. Then the blade. "No." He staggered. His throat constricted. In the shared vision, she did not scream. She only looked up, eyes glassy, voice barely audible as she whispered words of penitence. A prayer. A promise. "I will burn for what I am." The memory shattered. Damon tore himself free from the array, panting. His claws had extended. His jaw ached from how tightly he'd clenched it. Seren curled on the floor, arms cradling herself, whispering, "Don't look at that. Please don't look at that." He crouched beside her, a tremor in his hand as he reached out but did not touch. "I didn't mean to see," he said, voice raw. "I wasn't meant to see that." "Then don't." Her voice cracked on the words. "Close it. Shut it off. I don't want to share this." "You think I do?" he hissed, but it lacked heat now. It was hollow. Stricken. "You think I wanted to feel your bones break under their hands?" Silence pulsed between them, jagged as a second heartbeat. "I know what this is," she whispered. "You used me to anchor your curse, but you never expected my mind to bleed through. Did you?" He didn't answer. Because she was right. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to dampen the chaos in his blood. A living suppressant. Not a mirror. But she was a mirror. Every glimpse he stole from her showed him what he had never dared see in himself, what cruelty looked like, what obedience cost, what wrought the creed of control buried in the soul. He rose again, eyes flickering. The array pulsed beneath her, no longer fraying but quietly shifting. "You're not the key," he said softly. She looked up. "You're the mirror." And for the first time in years, he stepped out of the circle not triumphant but hollow. He no longer felt superior. He only felt seen. Chapter 5: When Wolves Kneel. The walls of the Cinder's pyre bled heat. That was the first thing Seren noticed, the way it seeped from the obsidian pillars like a living breath, curling around her throat, ghosting against her back in mocking caress. The air inside the Grand Hall of Wolves was heavy, thick with iron, incense, and something darker. Burnt fur, perhaps. Ashen memory. The ghosts of other kneeling bodies. Damon hadn't spoken a word since dragging her from the keep. He hadn't needed to. His grip on the chain collar around her neck was word enough, and the silence that followed his every step parted the way before them like a blade. Wolves, advisors, tacticians, alpha lords from every corner of the fractured realm turned from their heated debate one by one as he entered. A hush fell. Then came the sound of boots scuffing stone as the gathered alphas rose, not out of respect but reflexive dread. At his side, Seren kept her eyes down. "A gift," Damon said, his voice low and calm, a butcher's lullaby. "One that bleeds and breathes, but does not lie." He hauled her forward, the chain clinking as he jerked her to the center of the raised black dais. Before the high pyre sigil. Before the throne of bone and ember. "Is this the thing you've hidden in the tower?" growled Lord Varric, his one eye gleaming. "The one they whisper crawled from the Sefal Mass?" Damon smiled thinly. "She is more than that." Someone scoffed. Another stepped forward. "More? She reeks of curse. She reeks of potential." The room erupted. Disbelief, disgust, ridicule. "She's not even marked," one barked. "She is unbound and therefore uncontrollable. She's breathing. She's alive." Damon raised a hand. The room obeyed. "She is under a binding sigil," he said. "An anchor I constructed myself, with precautions that even your council's high mages dare not attempt. What you see before you is not a girl, not a monster, but a weapon. A controlled one." He turned to her then, voice dipping into ice. "Prove it." Seren's breath caught. I can't." "You will." He leaned close, lips near her ear. "Or I will force it. Here. Now." The silence that followed was deeper than before. She lowered to her knees. The binding sigil pulsed beneath her, ancient script carved into the volcanic stone, lines that shimmered faintly with red. She pressed her palms to the pattern. It burned instantly, lashing through her bones like liquid iron. Her back arched. Her teeth clenched. She didn't scream. "She must be resisting," someone muttered. "She's no better than the failed hybrids." "Wait." Damon stepped back. The sigil pulsed again. Then flickered. Then something else answered. The hall convulsed. A wave of psychic force ripped outward from the dais as Seren cried out, silver flashing across her skin like lightning caught in flesh. Her fingers curled, clawed, fractured with white glow. And then it happened. Fur. Her back split with a sound like wet tearing. Silver-white pelt, veined with deep crimson vines, erupted down her spine. Her fingers thickened into paws, her throat choked on a sound halfway between scream and howl. Wolves fell back. "Spirits help us," one whispered. "No. It can't be. That pattern. That marking." Damon didn't flinch. Her body hit the stone, writhing. She was shifting, but wrong, slowed, fractured, as if her body didn't remember how to be. It was the first time it had surfaced. The thing within. The thing left behind after that night. Her eyes flicked up. The room blurred. She tried to rise. She wanted to rise. To show them she wasn't a beast. Wasn't a mistake. Wasn't a curse. But the binding had failed. The pain hadn't. Her body crumbled again. And then, his boot pressed down on her shoulder. The crowd gasped. But Damon's eyes weren't cruel. They were focused. Alert. Because above them, in the arches, Ancient glyphs had begun to flare. The cinder spire wasn't just a hall. It was an amplifier. Every emotional surge inside echoed through its walls. If she lost control here, if he lost control here. He pushed down harder. Kneel, he said, not to punish her, but to force her into stillness, to protect her from the surge she didn't yet understand. She froze beneath him, trembling. He leaned low, voice a breath. Breathe. Just once. For me. She exhaled raggedly. He stepped off. Silence fell again, and she, shaking, half-shifted, skin glistening with torn silver threads, stood. Somehow. She stood. She did not look at the wolves. She looked only at him. The council ended shortly after. Words had lost their power in the wake of what had been seen. He didn't wait for their verdict. He seized the chain once more and led her, stumbling, down the echoing hall and into the underchamber. The war room. The doors slammed shut behind them. No one followed. He threw the chain aside. Locked the door. His back was to her. She coughed, arms folding over her chest as she tried to still her trembling form. Blood was drying down one leg. The shift had left fissures beneath her skin. He still didn't turn. Say it, she rasped. Say I failed. Damon turned. He didn't speak. He didn't move for a moment. Then he did. In 2 strides he was in front of her, hands gripping her arms, not cruelly, but firmly. Controlled fury. Or confusion. You weren't bred. You weren't born of the keep. You weren't summoned by any sigil I recognize. He searched her face like it might yield a confession. So who sent you? She blinked. I wasn't. His grip tightened. Don't lie to me. I don't know. His hand rose. Not in violence, but in frustration. It hovered midair for a breath too long. She flinched anyway. He froze. Then slowly, with a tremble that betrayed more than rage, he lowered it to her face. Touched her cheekbone. You shouldn't exist, he said softly. I didn't want to. That silenced him. Their breaths mingled. Too close. Then why did you kneel? He asked finally. She looked away. Because they needed me to. A pause. I didn't. She looked back. No, she said. But you made me. That landed like a lash. He didn't speak again. Instead, he turned. Fist to the stone wall, knuckles cracking open. Blood seeping down volcanic brick. She watched him, arms still folded. And for the first time, she wondered which of them was truly bleeding. Chapter 6, Let Me Burn for You. The doors slammed shut behind them. Heavy iron groaned against stone, the finality of its echo collapsing into silence. Damon stalked forward, boots hitting the floor in deliberate, lethal rhythm. The tactical chamber was dim, the only light coming from the embers of a brazier near the far wall. Smoke curled in the cold air, slow and suffocating. Seren stood with her back to the wall, spine straight despite the tremor in her legs. She still tasted the ash of the council floor in her mouth. Her knees ached from the stone. Her neck was damp with the heat of shame and adrenaline. Damon turned. The golden in his eyes had burned away, leaving molten black. Not rage. Not yet. Something worse. You lied, he said, low and precise. And you did it under my roof. I didn't, Seren said softly. You never asked the right questions. He reached her in 3 strides, towering over her, radiating fury through every inch of his body. His hand braced against the wall beside her head. The heat of him was unbearable, and still her traitorous body leaned into it. What are you? His voice cracked like a whip. What kind of wolf survives that ritual and doesn't tear the room apart? I didn't tear it apart, she whispered. You shifted, Seren. You weren't supposed to be able to shift at all. I didn't mean to, she said, her voice barely a breath. He snarled, something feral flashing in his eyes. Then what did you mean to do? What the hell were you planning with that magic? That cursed blood in your veins. She looked up at him. Her skin was glowing faintly now, a silvery sheen crawling over her throat like molten moonlight. Damon saw it too. His hand shot to her wrist, fingers encircling the faint burn of an old sigil, the remnant of a blood oath. As he gripped her, something unseen flared between them. Her body jerked, lips parting in a gasp. He staggered too, a ripple of energy like tearing fabric yanking through them both. "Don't touch me," she breathed. Too late for that. He held on tighter. The sigil lit brighter, pulsing, heat blooming beneath her skin until it spilled out in crimson flame. It wasn't fire that burned, it was pain. Hers. Shared. Ancient. A wind erupted between them, the soul-bound surge of a broken vow. Books flew off shelves. The brazier clanged against the wall. Her knees hit stone again. "I'm not here to save you," Seren hissed through clenched teeth. "I came to destroy the Godmark." Damon froze. The world narrowed to her voice, to the shimmer of her hair in the red light, to the agony blooming in both their chests. He could feel her pain as his own, stabbing into the hollow of his ribs. Her spine arched, her body bending under the unseen pressure. "I should kill you," he said, every syllable clipped and brutal. "I should end it here." "Then do it." Her voice cracked. "Because if you don't, I swear I'll finish what I came to do." She collapsed sideways, eyes fluttering shut. He caught her before she hit the floor. "Damn you," he muttered, holding her tightly, breath ragged. Her heat was seeping into him, threads of her soul tangled with his. The flare hadn't stopped. Her body pulsed with too much magic, too much memory, as if every buried pain was rushing to the surface. "You should have told me," he said, barely a whisper now. His grip around her shoulders tightened. "You should have told me what they made you into." "I didn't want to be made at all." Her eyes opened slowly, red gold light swimming in green irises. She looked dazed, hollowed out. His chest burned, the same burn she carried. The tether flared. "You think I haven't lived with regret?" she asked. "You think I got through one day of this alive without wanting to die?" His voice dropped hoarse. "You should have died." "Maybe I did." She exhaled, and the magic exploded. Not outward, inward. A pulse of silence dropped over the room. Books stopped midair. Dust froze in its swirl. Time felt paused between one heartbeat and the next. Then the crash came, not physical, but in their bond. The shared agony crescendoed, slamming into both of them. He felt her scars, too many, too old. She felt his silence, too loud, too proud. They breathed in each other's storms. Seren curled into him, face buried in his shoulder as her body shook. "I didn't want to kneel," she whispered. "Not again." He didn't reply. Couldn't. He lowered her carefully to the stone floor, not letting her go. His back hit the wall behind him as he sank, bringing her with him. The room trembled once more, and finally, the flare died down. Her skin stopped glowing. His claws retracted. The mark on her wrist faded into nothingness. But the pain didn't stop. It had only gone quiet. Their breaths tangled in the air, slow and shallow. His hand found her waist without thought, the other cradling the nape of her neck. She didn't push him away. She was too far gone. So was he. "I told you I wasn't here to save you," she murmured, voice fading. He rested his forehead against hers. "You better kill me next time," he said. "Because if you don't, I will make sure you regret every second you survive." She smiled, barely. "You think I've had even 1 second that wasn't regret?" And then neither of them spoke again. Only their chests moved, barely, as they lay in the ruins of a war neither of them had chosen, shoulder to shoulder, tethered to the same storm. Chapter 7, Breathe Me, Break Me. The guards were more careful with her now. They didn't shove Seren as hard, didn't bind her as tightly. But the moment the iron-laced doors to the moonstone baths groaned open, she understood why. Steam curled from silver-veined pools like breath drawn through clenched teeth. The scent of salt, soaproot, and something older, deep magic laced with minerals and memory, hung in the air. The high-domed chamber shimmered, torches low and flickering, their flames bending as if afraid to burn too high. She wasn't alone. A dozen men stood still as statues in the shadowed alcoves, chests bare, eyes sharp and amber-lit. Unmated alphas. The tension fractured with the first inhalation. She barely made it past the threshold before it began, the twitch in their shoulders, the shift in stance, their nostrils flaring wide. That cursed, traitorous scent clinging to her skin, not heat, not invitation, but something primal, forbidden. Damon's mark hadn't been burned deep enough to claim her fully, but her body, like kindling, was already scented by the flame. One stepped forward, then another. Not words, just sound. Low, guttural noises, breaths pushed through clenched throats, the kind of sound that preceded a hunt. Seren froze. No, she whispered, more to herself than them. The closest one tilted his head, scenting. His irises dilated, and a growl peeled from his throat. Seren's legs moved before her mind did. She turned to run, but a pair of arms caught her from behind and spun her into a wall. Not rough, not tender, just fast, just inevitable. A heartbeat later, all the air shifted. Damon's presence struck like a thunderclap. The temperature dropped. Every alpha in the room recoiled, not from pain, but instinct. His growl didn't shake the stones, it bent them inward. Back, he said, voice thick and distorted with something beneath human speech. Not a command. A warning. Still holding her wrist, he didn't look at her. One of the younger wolves didn't move fast enough. Damon didn't wait. In a flash, he was across the room, hand at the other alpha's throat, slamming him to the wall hard enough to leave a crack. You breathe her again. I'll make sure it's your last. A wheeze. A nod. The wolf collapsed. Without another word, Damon turned, scooped Seren into his arms, and walked straight toward the deepest pool. Put me down, she rasped, but the warmth of his chest bled into her spine like fire, and her traitorous body leaned in without permission. You want to draw more of them, he growled. She clenched her teeth. Then they were falling. Water engulfed them like silence. It wasn't hot. It wasn't cold. Just still, so still the world outside vanished. His body cradled hers beneath the surface, one arm braced behind her head, the other pinning her to his chest. His breath came fast against her temple. You think I brought you here for your comfort, he hissed against her hair. I brought you here so I wouldn't kill anyone. Seren shivered. His skin was fever-hot now, like something inside him had broken loose. I didn't ask for this, she breathed. Neither did I. His voice cracked. Their eyes met underwater, blurry, distorted, but his were pure gold. Not rage now. Something else. The bond between them pulsed like a heartbeat gone wrong. Her skin burned beneath the water, the faint glow of the blood vow waking again, dragging at her veins like something dying and unwilling to go alone. She reached for the surface. Her fingers never made it. Her vision splintered. In the water, in the silence, her mind collapsed inward. She was no longer there. She was him. A boy. Thin. Dirty. Huddled in the snow while wolves, bigger, older, circled. They laughed as they lunged. Bit. Left him bleeding. One of them kicked him in the ribs and called him Matron. Another spat, not wolf enough. Not man enough. What are you, Rhask? He didn't cry. Even as blood filled his mouth, he didn't cry. He stared at the snow. At the red staining it. At the white teeth that marked his thigh, tore his back open. But it wasn't fear that lived behind those gold eyes. It was silence. A still, awful silence. Like he'd already made a choice. She woke with his name on her lips. Damon. The world crashed back in. Warmth. Breath. Soft fur brushing her cheeks. She wasn't in the pool anymore. She was curled in a hollow beneath his beast form, half wolf, half shadow, all power, and his silver-black fur covered her like a blanket. The chamber was dark, the guards were gone. Just them. Just breathing. Just the tremble in her bones and the thunder still buried under his skin. He was still, but not asleep. His tail flicked once. His ears twitched. She didn't move. Didn't speak. Because here, in this space, beneath his ribcage, against the rhythm of his pulse, she felt something rare. Not safety. Not comfort. Just a terrifying, sacred quiet. Like the eye of a storm that hadn't yet passed. She closed her eyes again. And for a moment, despite herself, she let it hold her. Chapter 8. The Mind Shatter Howl. The metal clamps bit down around Seren's temples, cold as bone. A thin sheen of sweat beaded along her brow, and the scent of fear leaked off her skin in delicate, salt-slick tendrils. She sat upright in the iron-bound chair, wrists tethered to the arms, ankles locked in place. Her breath came shallow, and the walls of the blood-bound interrogation hall pulsed with a low hum, a sound that didn't belong to any machine, but to something older. Something that listened. "Begin," barked Tarson, his voice like glass dragged over stone. Damon stood across from her, shoulders coiled tight, his eyes the shade of darkened gold gone stormy. His jaw clenched, the wolf just beneath his skin prowling. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence was a blade pressed against her throat, yet it was not cruel, not now. It was hesitant. Begrudging. She caught a glint of emotion behind his gaze. Regret? No. Wolves like him didn't regret. But something softer, dulled by years of instinctual brutality, flickered there. "You will open to her," Tarson instructed, moving between them like a conductor in a cathedral. "And she to you. If the match is real, if the tether latent, this will find it." Seren's breath trembled. "What if it fails?" "It won't," Tarson said with a smile that showed too many teeth. "Or it'll kill you both. Either way, we learn." Damon's fists curled. The manacles at her temples pulsed once, then again, and light surged through the embedded veins of the chair. A sickening warmth slid into her skull. Then, contact. Her vision exploded into a swirl of white heat. A low, echoing howl rose inside her chest, but it wasn't hers. The world cracked, then broke open. The fire was everywhere. Her mother's scream was a thin thread through the smoke, choking, distant. "Seren, run." The floor caved. The roof burned. Her hands clawed against the stone and blood-slick wood. She saw her own face as a child, smeared in soot, eyes wide with betrayal. Her mother's hand had pushed her away, to save her? To abandon her? Pain buckled her inward. Then, a shift. Snow. A circle of snarling wolves. Not warriors. Not betas. Not even ranked. Half-breed, someone shrieked. Damon, much younger, shirtless in the freezing wind, dropped to one knee, lips split open. They tore at him, not to kill, but to shame. He didn't cry. He wouldn't. But the pain was there, swelling behind his eyes. A man stood above him, cloaked in deep crimson fur, eyes filled with disdain. "You are not my son." And with one brutal kick, the boy was sent tumbling from the stone dais, disappearing into snow and silence. Seren gasped, the breath torn from her lungs. Her body buckled forward, but the restraints held. She tasted bile. Fire and frost warred in her chest. Her skin burned where Damon's presence touched her mind. Too much, too close, too deep. Then it twisted. They were no longer watching memories. They were in them. The chair dissolved. Suddenly she was standing in the blood-bound hall again, but the sky above was cracked, bleeding light like a wounded moon. Damon towered before her, no longer man, no longer wolf, but something caught in the rift between. His eyes were wild. His hands dripped red. And he was looking at her. Not through her. At her. "You saw it," he rasped. Seren tried to speak. No sound came. Her body was shaking. A mirror shattered in her mind and scattered 1,000 selves onto the floor, each one a piece of her burned past, each one his too. The room spun. "You saw me," Damon repeated, voice hoarse, softer now. "And you didn't look away." Her knees hit the stone. A wave of nausea coiled up and she retched, her body rejecting the flood of psychic memory. Across from her, Damon staggered, clutching his head. Blood trickled from his nose. "No," she whispered, reaching out. "Don't let them see you like this." Crack. A wall burst outward. Metal and rock split like paper. The restraints snapped off her arms as Damon howled, a sound that cracked the air and reverberated through her ribs. Not anger. Not pain. Something more primal. Guards surged toward the breach. But Damon was gone. A streak of black and shadow melting into the ruined edge of the hall. The silence left behind was worse. Tarson cursed under his breath. "So, the beast still remembers." He turned to Mela, who stood in the shadows with her arms crossed. Her voice was low, nearly reverent. "You didn't just awaken his memories," she murmured, her gaze fixed on Seren's trembling form. "You woke his blood." Seren lay on the cold stone hours later, her body still racked with tremors, the ghost of that howl still echoing in her bones. She had seen him. All of him. His shame. His fury. The boy he had been. The beast he had become. And she had shown him hers. That fire. That scream. The moment her mother stopped reaching. They were both broken. Ruined. But now, for the first time, she didn't feel alone in it. And it terrified her. Chapter 9. The Wolf That Watches. The cold in Fong Keep was different than any she'd known. It didn't just creep along her skin or steal the warmth from her breath. It entered her mind, her bones. Seren Val sat by the frost-laced window of her new cell, no, her guest room, they called it now, a polished cage dressed in tapestries and warm firelight that didn't quite touch her soul. Outside, snow fell soundlessly. Within, the shadows whispered. She hadn't slept in days, not truly. Each time her lids grew heavy, the dream came, fire licking her mother's screaming mouth, a child's hand trying to reach through flame, the stench of burnt marrow. Then a voice, low, deep, fractured by distance. Seren. That voice didn't belong to the dead. It belonged to someone very much alive. Someone who had watched her burn. She jerked awake again, breath ragged, fingers clutching the woven blanket until her knuckles blanched. The air in the room felt thick with something more than wood smoke. Memory. Residue. His presence. "Bad night, my lady," came a voice, worn soft by years. Yoren, the Dareth family's oldest retainer, stood in the doorway with a small wooden tray. Seren managed a nod, her throat raw. She hadn't spoken in hours. Days? He placed the tray, steaming broth, hard bread, a folded note, on the table. Then lingered, hands folded in front of him. "I heard them moved you here. Better than the dungeons, at least." He looked at her carefully, eyes surprisingly lucid beneath his snowy brows. "And worse, in some ways." Seren tried to smile. Failed. "Do you know what they're planning?" "Planning?" Yoren snorted. "They never stop planning. The court thinks strategy is a language. But pain? Pain is more ancient." She met his gaze. "Why did he bring me here?" "After the trial." Yoren looked toward the fire, the light shadowing his face into valleys and folds. "He saw something in you, girl." She flinched. He went on, slowly. "You've got her blood, don't you?" "Whose?" "The White Witch." His mother. A pale-boned seeress from the Bonewood Marshes. They called her Alcara, but to Damon, she was something different. A secret too dangerous to name. Seren's hands tightened in her lap. She was executed. Sacrificed, Yoren corrected. She gave herself willingly. To silence something she'd summoned into the world. Something, wolf-born yet wrong. And when Damon howled that day, it wasn't the cry of a boy losing his mother. It was the awakening of what she'd tried to bury. Seren swallowed hard. The scent of burning hair returned, curling in her nostrils like ash. "You think I'm like her?" she asked. Yoren didn't answer directly. "He doesn't bring people here. Not even prisoners. Not unless they're part of the puzzle. And he watches you." She turned back to the window. "Even when you don't see him," Yoren added. "Especially then." He left her alone after that. The fire snapped low. Seren didn't touch the broth. That night, the dream changed. It wasn't fire this time, but snow, falling in great sheets across a silent forest. She wandered barefoot, white frost threading her gown's hem, breath blooming in the dark. The trees pulsed around her, branches bending as if listening. Then a howl. Long low. Like something had broken, not in the throat but in the soul. She turned toward the sound, every instinct screaming, and saw them, eyes in the dark. Gold. Unblinking. She woke with a gasp, the sheets twisted around her legs. Silence. Until a creak. A scent. Her heart stopped. She stood and crossed the room, hands trembling. Opened the shuttered window. The snow outside had stopped falling. But beneath the sill, something remained. Prints. Large, heavy, and human. Fresh. Unmelted. She clutched the frame with frozen fingers. He'd been here. But why didn't he come in? Why did he keep appearing in the moments she broke apart, only to vanish when she might ask why? The question lingered as she paced the room. Her breath fogged the window again. Her pulse would not calm. She remembered the note. Her hands tore it open without meaning to. No ink. No seal. Just a single word. Soon. She stared at it for a long time. By the time dawn bled cold across the snow-blanketed trees, she had made a choice. She could not stay caged by silence. When the guards brought her the next meal, she slipped past them, silent, barefoot, gown dragging across stone. No one tried to stop her. The doors were not locked. Outside, the forest waited. She stepped into the snow like a child into ocean tide. The cold bit her, but she didn't care. It cleared the haze. The trees closed around her like watchers, branches weighted with ice. Damon Rhask, she whispered. No answer. She moved deeper. Snow clung to her lashes. Damon Rhask, louder now, voice breaking. Still no answer. Then, alone among the trees, she screamed. Damon Rhask, what do you want from me? What do you want me to be? Her voice shattered on the frost. No answer came. But high above, from a ledge that caught no sun, a shape moved. Something golden watched her through the branches. And did not turn away. Chapter 10, When the Thorn Draws Blood. The forest should not have breathed. It pulsed instead. Each snow-laden branch above Seren's head seemed to twitch, as if caught in a heartbeat not its own. The hush of the woods was not silence, but a held breath. Fonkeep had long vanished behind her, and still she walked, the cold gnawing through her boots, her fingers numb despite being curled beneath her cloak. A thread of something unseen tugged at her ribs, like a forgotten name whispered too many times to still be memory. Bloodroot Forest. She had overheard the name from servants' lips, spoken in warnings soaked with old dread. A burial place. A forest that fed on secrets. She had not meant to follow the path, and yet each step felt not chosen, but inevitable. The trees thickened, bark mottled with frost, roots twisted like veins erupting from the earth. At their heart stood the altar, bone white and cracked through its center like a wound refused to close. She stopped. Her breath left her in a soft plume. Around the altar, there were no footprints but her own. Yet she knew she was not alone. You should not be here. His voice came like the first blade of wind after stillness, cutting, bitter, familiar. Seren turned slowly. Damon Rhask stepped from between two black-barked trees, snow melting on his shoulders, his eyes a cold gold flame. His cloak was gone. He wore only the dark leather beneath, his presence sharper than the winter air. And yet here you are, she said, keeping her voice steady, even as something in her spine coiled tight. He didn't move closer, but the forest did. Branches bent in his direction. The ground seemed to hush. You think this place calls to you because of curiosity? He asked. It's not a calling. It's a warning. Her jaw tensed. Then why do I feel it in my bones, Damon? Why do I dream of it when I sleep and ache toward it when I wake? His gaze flickered. Because something in you remembers what it did here. Seren stepped toward the altar. Then let it show me. He was before her in a breath, hand closing tight around her arm, not bruising, but firm enough to halt her. You have no idea what you're asking. I'm not asking, she whispered. He stared at her then. Something unspoken passed between them. He saw her defiance, her resolve, her unraveling. And she saw something raw in him, buried beneath centuries of restraint. It shimmered for a heartbeat and vanished. Let me go, she said, voice barely audible. I can't. Then feel it. She pulled her other hand free and drove her own palm down onto a half-shattered thorn that jutted from the altar base. It pierced deep, too quick for hesitation. Pain flared, hot and pulsing, and blood trickled like crimson ink over white bone. His eyes widened. A tremor rocked through him, not physical, not seen, but felt. His hand jerked from her. What did you? You said the bond is broken, she said, voice trembling. But you still feel it, don't you? When I bleed, you flinch. When I hurt, something in you still reaches for me. Why? Because you're reckless, he growled, but his voice cracked on the edges. He turned away, then turned back too quickly, like pacing would not save him from himself. She took a shaky step forward, blood still dripping from her palm, and touched her fingers to his collarbone. Or because something in you wants to feel it. His mouth found hers in the next breath, violent, fractured, desperate. Not a kiss, but a breaking. His hands cupped her face like he hated the softness of her skin. His lips crushed hers like he meant to forget or be punished or both. She gasped into his mouth, and he devoured the sound. The cold fell away. Snow sizzled where their bodies met. His palm slid into her hair, anchoring her, while the other gripped her waist, pulling her flush against him like closeness might somehow erase memory. He tasted of iron and fire and something unspeakably old. She kissed him back with blood in her mouth and salt at the corners of her eyes. And just as suddenly, he broke away. He staggered back like she had struck him. Damon. Don't, he rasped. Don't say my name like that. His chest rose and fell in frantic heaves. A fine tremor had entered his hands. And her blood had splattered against the bone altar. A hum. So low it was almost beneath sound. The altar pulsed, light glowing from cracks beneath its surface. Snow lifted in small flurries, caught in an upward pull like the wind reversed its gravity. Seren turned toward it, lips parted. A voice echoed from the stone, not spoken, but remembered. She who burned the first bond. Her knees buckled. Damon caught her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping tight around her. But he was staring at the altar, pale as the frost on her lashes. What did it say? She whispered, but she already knew. The altar gleamed. And in its pale surface something moved. A vision, fragmented, brittle, impossibly clear. She stood beneath twin moons, in a field of dead ash, holding a blade made of night. Damon knelt before her, bleeding from the chest. Her own hand drove the blade deeper. His voice, broken, reached her as he bled. You were supposed to choose me. The vision shattered like ice. Seren screamed. Her body arched in Damon's hold, and for a second, he looked like he might drop her or flee. But then he tightened his grip, one hand over her mouth, not to silence her, but to ground her. You weren't supposed to see that, he whispered. She looked up at him through tears, through blood. You've known, she said. Haven't you? That I killed you. His expression was agony. No. You killed someone who wore my face. But he wasn't me. Not yet. Her blood ran cold. What am I? His lips parted, and then he pressed his forehead to hers. You're the end of every oath I've made, he said. And the reason I keep making them anyway. He stood. Lifted her. She didn't resist. Couldn't. Her vision blurred, but the image of the altar stayed carved behind her eyes, glowing in the snow. She lay cradled in Damon's arms, cheek pressed against his chest. His heartbeat stuttered beneath her ear. And she smiled, just a little. "Now you bleed when I bleed," she murmured. His steps faltered. She closed her eyes, smile lingering like the taste of ash and wine. Let him carry her away from the place she once killed him. For now. Chapter 11. A mark beneath his touch. The temple bell tolled once, its echo shivering through stone like a warning. Frosthelm Temple was cloaked in an early twilight, the kind that pulled in corners and crept like spilled ink. Between the frozen arches and shadowed colonnades, Priestess Mavira's sandals made no sound as she approached Seren, eyes sharp, mouth unreadable. "You felt it too," Mavira murmured, not a question. Seren kept her arms folded tight across her chest, heart hammering beneath her ribs. "I don't know what you mean." Mavira's gaze dropped to her throat, just above the place where the high collar of her ceremonial garb fluttered. "There's an echo in your blood. Not recent, but ancient. Something moved when you passed the consecration basin. A mark not of this temple." Seren stepped back instinctively. "It must be a mistake." "I've never." "You know as well as I do," Mavira interrupted gently. "Our kind does not mark by mistake." The silence that followed was suffocating. "If it proves true," the priestess continued, her voice like a blade wrapped in velvet, "you will not be permitted to complete the redemption rite. Any union you seek will be deemed void." Tainted. Seren's nails bit into her palms. "I never asked to be part of the rite." Mavira gave a small, unreadable smile. "And yet here you are. Chosen." Later, much later, Damon Rhask shattered the calm of his private quarters when he hurled a goblet against the hearthstone. The crash did nothing to cool his fury. "She's lying," he growled. "Or worse, she's hiding it." "She has no reason to lie to you," came Aldrin's cautious reply from behind him. "She's never disobeyed you before." Damon's knuckles whitened as he gripped the mantle. "Then explain this. A blood debt mark?" "And she didn't tell me." A moment passed. Then he moved. Fast. Silent. Dangerous. Seren didn't have time to lock the door before it burst open, wind from the corridor chasing his cloak like a predator. He closed it behind him with a soft click. Her breath caught. "Damon." "Strip," he said, voice calm, too calm. She stiffened. "What?" "If there's a mark," he said, stepping closer, "I'll see it myself." She backed away until her spine hit the stone wall. His eyes burned gold. "Or do you want me to believe it's true? That someone else touched what's mine?" "That's not." Her throat closed around the denial. He moved in a blur. The collar of her tunic tore like paper. Cold air hit bare skin. "You don't get to hide from me," he said, fingers at her shoulders, thumbs digging into bone. "Not after everything." She slapped him. His head jerked to the side. But he didn't let go. "Tell me the truth." "I can't," she spat, tears gathering despite her fury. "You wouldn't believe me even if I did." "Try me." She stared at him. At the man who had dragged her from the forests, who had claimed her blood bond before she could say no, who burned hotter than fire when he touched her. The man who haunted her. "I never chose any of this," she whispered. That stopped him. Just long enough for her to shove him back a step. "You think I'm some willing offering?" Her voice cracked. "You think I wanted a mark? I was drugged. Held down. Someone made sure I couldn't scream." His expression twisted, first in disbelief, then in horror, then something worse. "You're lying." She laughed. Broken, bitter. "You want it to be a lie." He grabbed her then, not in anger, not quite. It was something more desperate. His mouth found hers in a kiss that scraped more than it soothed. Teeth clashed. She tasted iron. Hers? His? She didn't know. The back of her knees hit the edge of the ceremonial platform. He didn't let her fall. "Look at me," he hissed. Her eyes fluttered open. His palm hovered over her heart. The scent of ash and cedar filled her lungs, his scent, rising with something older. "I'm going to find it," he whispered. "Whatever it is that took you from me. I'll burn it out of you." "You think you can fix this with another scar?" she choked. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the silver dagger at his waist and sliced a thin line across his own palm. His blood dripped onto her chest, seeping into the space above her heart. The skin there shimmered, first faintly, then violently, as if something old and hidden stirred beneath the surface. Seren screamed. A phantom brand lit beneath her skin, a spiraling sigil, thorn-edged and pulsing red. Damon's eyes widened. "That's not ours," he said hoarsely. But the bond was forming anyway. He pressed his hand to the mark, forcing the connection through. A surge of heat flooded both of them. Pain. Ecstasy. A binding force that twisted between them like fire-choked roots. Seren clawed at the stone beneath her. "Stop, please." "It's too late," he whispered. "It's taking." Their minds collided. And in the midst of that flood, he saw it. Not a memory. A wound. Seren, pinned beneath shadowed hands, eyes wide and glassy with something unnatural. Her mouth was parted in a silent scream. A voice, not hers, chanting in a forgotten tongue. The mark carved into her like a punishment. And standing over her, his face blurred by shadow. A figure wearing the crest of the old blood, the one Damon's kind had purged generations ago. He ripped free of the bond. Both of them collapsed in opposite directions, panting. Her body shook. His hands trembled. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. She turned away from him, curling into herself. "Now you know." His jaw clenched. "Who is he?" "I don't remember." Her voice was small. "I never saw his face. I only know, the mark isn't yours." But it never felt like his either. He ran a hand down his face, smearing blood. Silence dragged between them. "You should have told me," he said finally. "I was afraid." Damon looked at her. Her skin still glowed faintly where the mark had stirred. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but there was something steady behind them. A kind of defiance. He stepped back. "I'm not done," he said. "This changes nothing. You're still mine." She didn't answer. But as he left the room, her fingers brushed over the place where his blood had touched her, where pain and desire had flared, and for the first time, she wondered what it might mean to belong to no one at all. Chapter 12, A Bond Not Chosen. The scent of bloodless snow. Then iron. The room did not belong to time. Its corners curled like burnt paper, shadows frayed into drifting threads. Walls bled into nothing, and the floor was soaked in dream-thick silence. Seren stood barefoot on the blackened wood, breath fogging, lashes heavy with cold tears she hadn't noticed falling. The memory wasn't hers, yet it was. It wore her skin. She was younger here. Barely more than a girl, with wrists like green stems and a mouth that still knew how to say no. Her white slip hung askew, shoulders trembling as she backed into the room's only wall, its surface pulsing with an unseen rhythm, like a heart still beating in a corpse. And he stepped in. A figure faceless, limbed in silver, a cloak that shimmered like a dying star, boots soaked in old mud, gloved hands that flexed as he shut the door with a soft click. She could smell him even now, wolf musk turned sour, threaded with dominance and damp pine. The alpha who had marked her. "No, dream," Seren whispered, voice thin to a reed. "Please." Her voice went unanswered. Or perhaps it was heard and dismissed. She flinched when he touched her shoulder, and her body reacted first, before her will, before her rage. The bond snapped awake like a predator from sleep. Her limbs betrayed her, a hot, treacherous flush blooming across her chest, her thighs. She gasped not from pleasure, but from the brutal theft of choice. His fingers pressed to her nape. A burn. A bite. Fangs, not his, not hers, not faded. Just placed. The mark flared, and the scream caught in her throat like a rusted blade. Her body convulsed as if thrilled by pain. Her spine arched. Her breath came shallow and fast. He didn't take her with violence, not in the usual sense. There was no shouting, no blow. Only claiming. Methodical. A ritual. The kind no one believed when spoken of in court. The kind buried beneath silence and the words, "It is what you were meant for." The walls moaned with her, or perhaps that was the sound of her soul splitting. She buckled, shivering, eyes wide and dry now, shock like winter across her face. He kissed her cheek, a sick benediction. Then nothing. The memory peeled away. And Damon Rhask was drowning in it. His own mind rejected the vision even as it clung to it. He stood not in the memory, but outside it, body carved into rigid lines, fists clenched until the knuckles cracked. Around him, the vision broke like ice on water. One moment, she was crying against a door. The next, he stood alone in a corridor of memory hollows, the echoes of her breath ghosting across his skin. She hadn't chosen the bond. She hadn't even wanted it. His throat locked. "Seren," he choked, breaking the dream bind with a gasp. His body hurtled back into reality. Cold sweat drenched his color, spine against the stone floor, vision reeling as if he'd fallen from a great height. She lay across from him, unconscious, barely. Her face pale. Her brow damp. And her scent, wrong. Too quiet. Like she'd gone under and hadn't come back. "Seren." He crawled to her side, cupping her face. "You're here. You're real." Her lashes fluttered. A breath escaped. She flinched from his touch. "I saw it," he whispered, each word like gravel dragged across bone. "I saw what he did." She blinked once. Then twice. And her mouth twisted into something halfway between a sob and a smile. "Took you long enough." Damon recoiled as if struck. "Why didn't you tell me? What difference would it have made?" "Every difference." Her head lolled to the side, gaze unfocused. "It's done. It was always done. The bond, it doesn't fade. It scars." Damon clenched his jaw, forcing the bile back down. He remembered the way her dream body had flinched when touched. The way her voice cracked, raw and small. And he had thought she was defiant. Fierce. Untouchable. He hadn't seen the ruin she lived in. He hadn't known she had once been a temple desecrated. His fingers hovered at the edge of her collarbone. The mark was gone, no longer visible. But in the dream, he'd felt it blaze. It had burned into him, too. And something inside him shifted. Broke. Reformed. He wanted to kill the man who had done this. Rip his throat out. Crush his bones. Feed his soul to the howling dark. "I'll find him," Damon growled, voice barely human. "I'll rip him apart." Seren's voice was barely audible. "He's already dead." Silence coiled between them like smoke. And Damon stilled. Her eyes, half-lidded, met his. "I buried him myself." He did not ask how. Not yet. Because she was trembling. So he did the only thing he could. He lay beside her, careful not to touch, and said nothing. And in the long silence that followed, Seren curled toward him, not because she trusted him, not because she was healed, but because her body, exhausted by pain, sought the warmth of another. His hand hovered above hers. He didn't take it. Didn't dare. But his voice came like thunder muffled in snow. "You deserve to choose." Seren, eyes still closed, whispered, "Then stop looking at me like I'm broken." And with that, the last thread of the dream dissolved, leaving behind only breath and blood, and the echo of a girl who had once screamed in silence. The echo that still hadn't stopped. Chapter 13, What the Ashes Remember. The trees of Ashfall stood like monuments to a forgotten war, trunks hollowed and calcified, their limbs raised skyward like bleached fingers clawing at the slate-colored sky. The air here was brittle, dry with the scent of ancient smoke and memory. Seren's cloak fluttered at her ankles as she walked beside Damon, her breath shallow. The silence between them had thickened since the vision, since the shared memory that neither of them could name aloud. Damon hadn't spoken of it since withdrawing from the resonance link. But the way he looked at her now, like she might shatter if he dared to blink. They reached a clearing where the trees bent into a perfect circle, as if scorched into compliance. At its center stood a monolithic stone altar, choked in soot and time. Sitting before it, barefoot, blindfolded, and still as a relic, was Zareth, the infamous Ash Seer. "Speak your need," Zareth rasped before they had made a sound. "The Ash does not suffer liars." Damon stepped forward. "We seek to witness a death. A man's. One that occurred years ago." Zareth tilted his head. "Many have died. You'll need more than a grievance." Seren's voice was quiet but sure. "He marked me. I never chose him. And someone tore him apart." Zareth's face twitched beneath the blindfold, as if seeing through it. "Then let the dead tell their tale." He lifted a bowl from the altar, its interior lined with charred bone. As he whispered over it, the wind died. The trees stilled. Then came the ash. From the canopy above, flakes drifted down, glowing faintly, swirling unnaturally until they formed a vortex above the bowl. Within the vortex, shadows stirred. Seren gasped. A room emerged, walls blackened with soot, a cot in the corner, a silver-stitched cloak discarded on the ground like a snake's skin. A girl knelt in the center. Young, frozen, trembling. It was her. Even now, Damon's fingers curled into fists. He did not look at Seren. He couldn't. The vision stuttered, leaping forward like a broken reel. The door flung open, and the Alpha entered, not fully seen, a smudge of silver and dominance. His voice was a low murmur, but the room shuddered around it. Seren flinched at his touch. Her body stiffened. Her mouth moved, whispering no. And then, the door burst inward again. Something massive erupted through the threshold. Not a man. Not even a wolf, but something between, all claws and shadow and vengeance. The Alpha scream barely had time to rise before it was drowned in a snarl so deep it rumbled the altar stone beneath their feet. Blood hit the walls. The vision crackled. A final image emerged, fleeting, blurred, but unmistakable. A green cloak whipping behind the beast, its embroidered sigil catching in the firelight. A thorn-wreathed crescent moon. Damon staggered back as if struck. "No," he whispered. That can't be." He hadn't seen that cloak since. "Alira," he said, his voice shaking. "My sister wore that. Before she vanished." Seren's knees gave out. She fell to the ground but didn't cry out. Her eyes filled, not from fear, but something rawer. Deeper. "She killed him," she whispered. "She killed him for me." Damon knelt beside her, his throat tight with emotion too tangled to name. She might have known. Might have seen. Seren looked up at him. Her lips trembled, but she smiled, just barely. "Then your blood gave me back something I lost." He touched her hand, hesitant, reverent. "You deserved that. And more." Zareth's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "But justice, even in ashes, carries a scent. And now it draws predators." Seren blinked. "What do you mean?" Zareth reached into the bowl, sifting the still glowing ash between his fingers. "Blood marked by vengeance breeds hunger. You carry it now. And those who cleanse bloodlines, have caught the trail." Damon rose. "Who are they?" Zareth turned his blindfolded gaze toward him. "The High Sentinels. Elite hunters of the old code. They seek to erase impurities, both the cursed and those who helped them." Seren's pulse quickened. "They're coming for me?" Zareth nodded. "And they are close." The wind picked up again, whispering through the branches like a warning. The ash dispersed, sucked back into the bones of the forest. Damon reached for Seren's arm, steadying her. "Then we don't stay here." He didn't wait for her agreement. Just pulled her close, shielding her as if his body alone could undo what the vision revealed. She didn't resist. As they stepped away from the altar, Seren glanced back one last time. The ash had settled, but she could still feel the echo of Alira's fury, the ghost of her vengeance. In the quiet that followed, Damon spoke again. His voice was barely audible. "If she really did that, if Alira destroyed him for you." Seren turned her gaze toward him. "I will find her," he said. And if she's still alive, she'll know who else is coming. They disappeared into the folds of the forest, unaware of the other pair of eyes watching, hooded, gleaming with the promise of judgment. The ashes had remembered. Now others would come to silence what remained. Chapter 14. Hunter's Eyes on Her. The frost bit deeper in the border camps than anywhere else in the northern territories. Wind held low between the unfinished stone palisades like a wounded thing, dragging ice through every crack of the barracks. Yet Seren Val sat motionless at the edge of her cot, wrapped in a wolf fur cloak too large for her, breath clouding the air. She was trying not to think. Not of ashes. Not of pain. Not of the cloaked figure in the memory vessel whose face she never saw. And especially not of Damon Rhask. His scent still clung to the cloak, to her skin. Warmth had become a cruel ghost. A knock, sharp and rapid. She rose before the third strike, the instinct of prey too long hunted. When she opened the door, it wasn't Damon. It was silence. Thick. Pressing. Wrong. Then he stepped from the shadow. A man cloaked in night-dyed armor, half his face covered by an ash-gray mantle. Torin. The crescent insignia of the king's high huntsman gleamed on his shoulder, blood-forged and bone-framed. His eyes were pale, silver without soul. They slid over her with the precision of a butcher. Not the lust of a man. Not the curiosity of a scholar. Just function. You carry the taint, he said. Seren's hand drifted to her side, where Damon's dagger had once hung. I carry nothing, she said. I was cleared in Frostvale. By those too afraid to see what festers under your skin. He moved closer, and the scent of anise and iron flared. The bondmark is unstable. The council has convened. You're to be brought in, sedated, if need be. Damon is compromised, he interrupted coldly. Rhask bloodline has always been possessive. He should never have touched you. I didn't give him a choice. The huntsman smiled. It wasn't kind. Exactly. He raised his gloved hand. Runes shimmered like frostbite on leather. Before she could scream, the pressure hit. A vice clamped around her skull. Not physical, worse. A psychic clamp, ancient and merciless. It twisted her thoughts like a hand wringing out a rag, turning memory to sludge. Her breath fled her throat. Her legs buckled. Name him, Torin whispered. The Alpha who marked you first. Who cursed you. Blood dripped from her nose. Her fingers scratched at her scalp, finding nothing but sweat and splinters. I don't know. Liar. He raised the pressure. Her spine arched, heels skidding on the wooden floor. Light burst behind her eyelids. Then, a howl tore through the barracks. Something crashed through the far wall like a thunderclap. Wood shattered. Flame erupted from a shattered lantern. And through the smoke and ruin stepped Damon Rhask. Not cloaked. Not civilized. Shifted. He stood half wolf, half man, broad-shouldered, claws bared, golden eyes burning with wildfire. His cloak had fallen. His chest heaved, striped with scars. His voice, when it came, was more growl than speech. Get away from her. Torin pivoted, drawing a curved hunting blade etched in poison ink. You've made a mistake, Rhask. This girl is diseased. She is mine. The sentence cracked like a whip in the air. Torin lunged. Damon caught the strike with his forearm, the blade slicing deep. Blood misted. But Damon didn't flinch. He shoved forward, jaws opening, not for a bite, but a roar. The force knocked Torin back, staggering him. Seren gasped as the clamp fell. She curled on the floor, retching air. The two alphas clashed again. Blade met claw. Damon's hand shot forward, gripped Torin's throat, and slammed him into the wall with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. You think you're a hunter, Damon snarled, voice thick with fury. But you stalked the wrong prey. Torin's blade flicked up, caught Damon's side. The older alpha grunted, blood slicking his ribs. But he didn't let go. You can kill me, Torin choked out, but you'll never understand her. She's not bonded to just one. What did you say? Torin's eyes gleamed. You thought you were the only one, didn't you? Damon's claws tightened. Bone groaned. She's been marked before. Or will be again. A wet laugh. You're just a shadow in a cute Rhask. Damon's teeth bared. His hand twisted. Torin stopped breathing. The huntsman crumpled. For a moment, only the fire crackled. Seren coughed, pulling herself up against the cot's edge, eyes wide and tear-glossed. Damon turned, bloodied, panting. She didn't move. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. I should have come sooner. He stepped toward her. Her body flinched. He froze. Don't touch me, she said. Not until you tell me what he meant. Damon's chest rose and fell like a sea in storm. He looked at her like she was glass he'd already cracked. I don't know, he said finally. But I'll find out. Silence again. But now it throbbed with a new pulse, doubt, thick and suffocating. She looked down. His blood was on her palms. His scent had changed. Fiercer. More feral. But beneath it, still him. I'm not strong enough, she murmured. Damon knelt slowly beside her. You don't have to be. I'll be strong enough for both of us. A sound escaped her then, somewhere between a sob and a laugh. She leaned into him, trembling, head pressed to his shoulder. I felt it, she said, barely audible. When he touched my mind. There was something, like a door. Locked. But there. I think he's right. Damon's arms tightened. Then we break it open, he said. Together. Far above the camp, clouds rolled like bruises across the moon. In the shadows beyond the border, other eyes watched. Not all bonds are blessings. Some are buried knives. And some are still waiting to be claimed. Chapter 15. Another hell beneath her skin. The mountain air was thin and cold, coiled tight with silence. Snow clung to the ledges of the crag outside, and the low-hung moon cast a blood-tinged hue through the thin curtain of the bedchamber. It painted the stone walls in pale rust, the color of dried betrayal. Seren thrashed in her sleep. The fur blankets tangled at her hips, bearing the slick sheen of sweat on her collarbone. Her fingers curled into the linen, and her throat worked around a soundless gasp. Beneath her skin, beneath her heartbeat, something called. No, someone. It wasn't Damon's voice. Sanbaya. The name wrapped around her like a snare. Coaxing. Claiming. Not screamed, but murmured, as if pressed against her nape with the breath of a ghost. Seren jolted, but her body didn't follow. She hovered in the space between dreaming and waking, limbs paralyzed, soul trapped. A field of red stretched before her mind's eye, darkened by looming silhouettes. The scent of ash and wild roses, how could she remember a fragrance she'd never known? And then came the howl. Not Damon's. Lower. Hungrier. From deeper inside her own body. No, she gasped, half asleep. I don't know you. But the dream persisted. She was dressed in something white. No, not white. Bone. She stood beneath a bleeding moon, surrounded by a ring of standing stones, none she recognized, but they felt familiar, as if carved from her own memories. A hand held hers. A thumb traced her pulse. A voice whispered against her lips, "You were promised to me beneath this moon. Don't forget it now." A pair of eyes, silver, molten, burned through the veil of her memory. She screamed. Reality tore back like skin from a wound. Her body seized, and the mattress shifted violently beneath her. A shadow lunged across the room, Damon, his arms catching her just before she rolled off the bed. Seren. Breathe, he ordered, his voice low and guttural. She was gasping as if surfacing from drowning, her limbs shaking uncontrollably. Damon's arms anchored her against his bare chest. The heat of his skin seared into her spine, a lifeline. She was aware of every breath he took, every beat of his heart like a war drum behind her ribs. It's still there, she whispered. It didn't leave. What didn't? She turned in his grip. Her eyes found his. Gold against green. Real. His. Her mate. Her only mate. But her body betrayed her. A tremor ran through her abdomen, a pulse between her legs that didn't belong to this room, this man, this bond. Her skin tingled, hypersensitive. And beneath it, a second rhythm. "Something else is inside me," she said, voice cracking. "Calling." Damon's jaw tightened. Torin's words. They weren't lies. Her voice broke. "I heard it. I felt it." His arms didn't loosen. But something in his body went still. "I tried to fight it," she whispered. "I told it no. But it said a name." Damon's fingers dug into her arms. "Whose?" "Mine," she said. "Not this name. Not Seren." He waited. "It called me Sanvaya." His breath caught audibly. Seren covered her mouth, as if the name itself had cut her tongue. "I've never heard it before," she continued, panicked. "But it knew me. I responded to it. I shouldn't have, but my body," her breath hitched. It reacted like it belonged to him. Silence fell like a blade. Damon stepped back slightly, still holding her hand. He stared at her, through her, with a storm behind his eyes. She expected fury, jealousy, even disgust. But he only asked, voice hoarse and barely audible, "Tell me the truth. Who are you?" "I don't know anymore," she said. "But if I once made a vow to him, it was a mistake. A trap." He didn't flinch. Seren's lip trembled. "If I ever swore to love him, Damon, it must have been to betray you." Damon exhaled like he'd been stabbed. But still, he pulled her to him, cradling the back of her head against his shoulder. "You didn't choose this," he murmured. "We'll burn it out of you." Whatever echo he left. "I don't want to be burned again," she whispered. "But I feel like I'm splintering. Like I'm made of two skins. And he, whoever he is, he's beneath the second one. Scratching to get out." Damon pressed a kiss to her temple. "I'll hold you together," he vowed. But she felt it again, even as she leaned into him. A heat that wasn't his. A pull that slithered beneath her skin, coiling in the dark. Somewhere in her blood, another hell stirred. Chapter 16. The name she locked away. The world she woke into was made of mist. It pulsed like breath around her, the trees indistinct shadows draped in silver veils. Each leaf shimmered with frost, not cold, but memory, hanging still in the air, like time had paused just to whisper. Somewhere beneath her bare feet, the earth hummed with an ancient tune, low and resonant, as if the forest itself remembered her better than she remembered herself. "Seren, no. Sanvaya." The name slid over her skin like a shackle. Not spoken aloud, not yet, but the forest breathed it with every sighing gust, every shifting branch. She walked through it without knowing how her legs moved, every step tugging at something behind her ribs. The trees parted into a clearing, and there it was again. The blood moon. A crimson orb, bloated and leering above a stone altar tangled with vines. Its glow spilled red over the marble like spilled wine, like something sacrificed. She knew this place. She knew the scent of iron and rosewood, the sound of a boy's voice trembling as he swore. "I vow myself to your ruin," he had whispered, pressing his mouth to her palm. The dream never changed. But tonight, it bled differently. His face remained hidden, a smear of shadow just beyond clarity. But she remembered the heat of his breath, the tremble in his spine as he pressed his brow to her sternum. She remembered the way he'd said Sanvaya like it was a prayer. Or a sentence. She clutched her chest. There was nothing there now. No mark. No chain. But her feet refused to move. Her body hung suspended, as if her own flesh had remembered the vow she tried so hard to forget. "You don't belong to him anymore," she whispered, the words tearing out of her like thorns. "You are not her." But the mist only curled tighter, weaving around her wrists like ribbons, binding her in place. Beneath her skin, something stirred. A low hum, a heartbeat out of sync with her own. Another rhythm. Another wolf. "Do you feel me, little mate?" The voice slithered under her skin. Not Damon's. Warmer. Older. The echo of a bond never broken. She screamed in silence. And far, far away, someone heard. Damon stood at the edge of the cot, his hands clenched and trembling. Seren's body twisted beneath the sheets like it was being pulled by invisible threads. Sweat soaked her temples, her lips parted around a whimper. He had felt it earlier, that sudden discord in the bond. A fracture. A second pulse beneath her skin. She was being called. Not by him. Damon's breath hissed through his teeth. He pressed his palm to her sternum, fingers splayed, matching the phantom rhythm beneath. No, he growled. You don't get to take her. His mind opened. It wasn't safe, wasn't right, forcing a link like this. She hadn't invited him in. But the bond between them cracked wide like a fault line, and he dove. The silver fog swallowed him whole. He found her in the clearing, knees buckled beneath the blood moon's stare. Her body was frozen mid-collapse, her eyes wide and full of tears that did not fall. A memory held her in place like a curse. Damon staggered forward, every breath thick with resistance. This wasn't his domain. Seren, he said, but the name dissolved in the mist. Her eyes didn't move. Not Seren, the forest whispered. Sanbaya. He knelt before her, his heart thundering in his chest. This was not just memory. This was legacy. This was what she had locked away. I don't care what name they gave you, he said softly, his voice cracking under the weight of it. You don't belong to the past. You're mine now. She flinched. His hand moved to her chest, over where he knew the mark had once been. He could feel it now, not the skin, but what lay beneath. An imprint. A scar the shape of a vow. And still, that second bond pulsed like a lover's breath against his hand. Damon leaned forward, his lips brushing the center of her chest. The echo of that old mark burned through his mouth. You don't need his name, he murmured against her skin. You are Seren Val. You are mine. The silver mist around them trembled. A low groan echoed through the trees. Her eyes snapped toward him. And she screamed. Not in fear, but in grief. In fury. In relief. It tore from her like a dam had shattered. I remember him, she choked. He called me by that name, Sanbaya. He kissed my blood. He said I would destroy everything. You won't, Damon whispered. Her fingers fisted his tunic, pulling him against her. You don't understand. I said yes. I swore it. I let him touch me and claim me in the dark. I wanted it. Her body trembled with revulsion. I am not clean. I let someone else mark me before you. Damon's breath hitched. Her shame spilled between them like oil. He pressed his forehead to hers. You are not the one who should be ashamed, he said. They used you. Twisted whatever vow you made. But you're here. With me. Her voice was barely audible. Would you still want me if I was made to betray you? Damon's hand cradled her cheek. I want you because you survived it. She began to sob, her fists still tangled in his shirt, body racked with guilt that didn't belong to her alone. He kissed her, her eyelids, her cheeks, the corners of her trembling mouth, until her breathing softened, until her limbs began to unfurl. But the fog behind her stirred again. Another figure stepped out. Same height, same eyes. A face like Damon's, only gentler. More radiant. Eyes of fire, not gold. And his voice was silk soaked in menace. She is not yours to keep, the Phantom Alpha said. She was made to ruin you. Damon turned, his body shielding hers. I don't care, he snarled. Let her. The Phantom smiled like a man remembering his own funeral. You've already forgotten me, he said. But I am the part of you that cannot be severed. Then he was gone. And the fog shattered. Seren gasped awake. Her chest rose like she'd been drowning. Her limbs shook as if from seizure. Damon caught her before she could fall off the cot, his hands anchoring her, steady as stone. I'm here, he said hoarsely. You're safe. She didn't feel safe. Her body ached. Her heart cracked. But when she looked at him, everything broke anew. If I ever swore to love him, she whispered, it was only so I could betray you later. And in that moment, she hated and loved herself equally, because she didn't know which part of that was a lie. Chapter 17, The Thorn Between the Two. The wind that coiled through Ashrend's sacred corridors was no natural breeze. It whispered of blood oaths and unspoken choices, of centuries sealed in fractured stone. Seren walked without trembling, though every step felt like it echoed through the bones of the dead. The shard vault awaited her, hollowed from the heart of the mountain, its walls lined with silver-veined rock that pulsed faintly under the torchlight, as if remembering a heartbeat long extinguished. Damon trailed behind her, silent. His presence was a shadow that warmed the edge of her spine, yet made her feel more exposed than ever. Since waking from the dream he had torn her from with a name she didn't know she had locked away, Seren hadn't spoken more than a dozen words. Her body still remembered the weight of his mouth against her chest, the heat of his voice saying, "You are Seren." Not hers. Not his. Her mind, however, refused to settle. There was something older, deeper still, clawing behind her ribs. She didn't look at him as they reached the vault doors. High Priest Kalen stood waiting, wrapped in his ceremonial ash-gray robes. His eyes were pale and unblinking, like glass ground from ice. "The Shard Vault is no place for hesitation," he said. "What you ask may not be undone." "I don't seek undoing," Seren said quietly. "Only truth." Kalen inclined his head and turned. The doors groaned open under his touch, ancient sigils flaring briefly before sinking back into dull stone. Inside, the air was cool, still, and faintly metallic. At the chamber's center, suspended by silver chains from the vaulted ceiling, hovered the shattered core of the primordial signet, the original mark said to bind all alphas to the throne of old. Its pieces glimmered with opalescent frost, etched with wounds that pulsed like half-healed scars. Seren stepped forward, past the circle of watching acolytes, past Kalen's unreadable expression, until she stood before the relic. "Your blood," Kalen said. "Nothing more. If you carry either mark, riven or royal, it will answer." Her hand trembled slightly as she drew the blade from her sleeve. Damon tensed beside her, but said nothing. He hadn't touched her since the dream. Not her wrist, not her name. His restraint scraped deeper than any fevered grip. Seren pressed the blade into her palm. A thin line of crimson welled up and fell. The blood touched the shard. The air shattered. Not with sound, but light. Two distinct glyphs flared across the chamber floor, one like a crescent split by thunder, the other a crowned tree encircled in flame. Both ancient. Both incompatible. Both hers. Gasps rippled from the gathered watchers. Kalen stepped forward, lips parting around a single word, impossible. The shards began to hum. Seren's knees buckled, but she remained standing barely. She felt both symbols crawl under her skin, twisting up her spine, clawing through her lungs. Damon caught her, not like a lover, but like a soldier catching a blade. His arms braced her as the storm settled, though his jaw was clenched so tightly she felt the tremor in his chest. Kalen knelt beside them. "You are neither heir nor rebel. You are the fracture. The unmaking." Seren coughed, the blood taste still on her tongue. "Then what does that make me?" "The end of choosing," Kalen whispered. "The end of Alpha." Damon's breath hissed between his teeth. "She was never meant to choose?" His voice was hoarse. "Not me. Not him. Not anyone." Kalen nodded once. Her fate was never to belong. It was to dismantle. Silence. Then, "I see," Damon said. The words were almost gentle. But Seren had never heard anything more hollow. She turned her face to him, lips cracked and dry. "So I am not your mate." Damon didn't answer. "You said you felt it," she pushed. "In your blood. In your bones." "I did," he said, voice low. "And maybe I was wrong. Or maybe I was." Her voice was thinner now, fraying at the edges. "Maybe I just wanted to be someone's, so badly, that I let the bond lie to both of us." He turned away, the shadow of his profile cold and clean. She watched the lines of his throat shift as he swallowed. He always did that when he was about to say something he didn't want to feel. But then, slowly, she reached for him. Just fingertips brushing his arm. "I know what I have to become," she said. "What they all want me to destroy. But I want, just one night. Before I'm no one's. Before I'm everyone's." Damon's breath caught. "You want to be mine," he said. Not a question. "No," Seren whispered. "I want to feel like I am. Just for tonight. That's all I can take." A pause. Then Damon moved. He didn't kiss her mouth. Not at first. He pressed his lips to the wound on her palm, to the place where her blood had awakened something no one could control. He tasted the rebellion she carried, the ruin, the legacy of things that refused to die. He pulled her close, not as a mate, but as a man refusing to let go of a wound he didn't want to heal. Clothing rustled. Fingertips trembled. Her breath hitched as he traced the place just beneath her collarbone, where the dream mark still ached like a phantom bruise. "I will regret this," he murmured. She nodded against him. "So will I." They sank together into the cold silver floor, into a hush where the world couldn't reach. Into a silence forged from grief and craving, from wanting something neither had words for anymore. And still, she clung. His name was a thorn in her mouth. Hers was a flame in his. When it was done, they lay in silence. He didn't hold her. She didn't ask. At the far end of the chamber, Kaelin lit the last torch. The floor beneath them shifted. A new symbol rose between the old ones, neither riven nor royal. A sigil unknown. Carved into the stone beneath it were words too old for common tongue. Kaelin read them aloud, voice low and shaking. "True mates do not live to complete. They burn to destroy." Damon closed his eyes. Seren stared at the ceiling, where cracks had begun to form. And somewhere, in the echo of her name, the world began to unravel. Chapter 18, His Bite, Her Betrayal. The moon was high and full, not yet blood-red, but already pulsing with the feverish omen of what was to come. In Ashrend's hidden wing, built for kings and killers, not lovers, Seren stood before a mirror she could not face. Her fingers trembled as she unfastened the ceremonial clasps down her shoulder. The fabric slid from her skin like surrender. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and haunted, the mark on her neck still faint, Damon's first bite, unfinished. Behind her, the heavy door opened with the soft sound of breath held too long. "You're sure?" Damon's voice was low, unreadable, but something in it cracked like frost underfoot. "The blood moon rises tonight." She nodded once, but didn't turn. "It has to be now. Before the pull makes me dangerous." "You've been dangerous from the moment I saw you," he said. The door shut. Leather dropped. Boots followed. She felt him before he touched her. A heat like no fire could mimic. The bond between them, half forged, half feared, throbbed in the air. Her body answered before her heart did. Damon's arms circled her from behind, his breath warm on her shoulder. "No one's watching us tonight, Seren." "I know," she whispered. "Then don't lie," he murmured. "Not to me." She turned, and there he was, golden-eyed, feral, beautiful in that way only ruin could be. He bent his head and brushed his lips against hers. This time, she didn't flinch. She kissed him back with a hunger born not of mating instinct, but of goodbye. They stumbled together to the low-slung altar bed. The furs were cold. Their skin made them warm. Clothing fell. Mouths found skin. His hands mapped her ribs, her thighs, her trembling spine, as if memorizing every part of her. Her fingers tangled in his hair as he kissed her pulse, kissed the bite he had left unfinished, kissed lower until she arched like she could be pulled apart by wanting alone. He rose above her, pupils blown wide, and for a moment he looked like something no longer human. "You want the bond?" he asked. "The real one? The kind that brands your soul?" "I want you," she said. "For tonight." That was all it took. He bit her again, deeper this time. Not a love mark, not a claim, but the beginning of something eternal. She gasped as the magic lit her veins. Her back arched, hands clawing at his shoulders, and the bond began to form, threads of light in her mind, heat between their bodies, shared breath, shared ache. Their bodies moved like one. Every thrust drove them closer to something irreversible. The pain of it, the bliss of it, the wild pulse of their spirits colliding, it drowned her. She could feel him losing himself. Feel him surrender to the mate bond, as wolves were made to do. His eyes, half-shifted now, glowed down at her with awe. Seren. He didn't see the movement. Her hand reaching toward the pillow where she'd hidden the blade. He didn't feel it, until it was in him. A thin dagger, silvered and blessed, drove between his shoulder blades. Not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to wound. Deep enough to break a bond mid-forging. He froze, then choked. His body collapsed beside hers, spasming as the bond tore in half. Seren scrambled back, panting, eyes wide with pain and something worse, guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Blood stained the furs. His hand reached out, trembling, catching hers before she could run. "Why? I choose you," she said, voice cracking. "But I can't let you be destroyed for me. I won't turn you into what I'm becoming." Damon tried to sit up. His back arched with agony. "You think this saves me?" "No," she whispered. "But maybe it saves the part of you I love." She reached into her robes and pulled out the shard, still glowing with her blood and the imprint of the dual marks. She left it beside him. Then she placed a folded paper against the stone table, kissed the back of his hand, and ran. He didn't stop her. Couldn't. He lay there, body shaking, mouth tasting blood and memory and betrayal, until the door swung open again, not Seren, but Irisa. She took one look at the bed, at the blood, at the abandoned shard, and paled. She took it, Damon rasped. She took the core. Irisa didn't answer right away. She picked up the note, read it once, then crumpled it in her fist. "She's gone to the blood pillar. To awaken the last sigil." Damon's golden eyes darkened. "Then she's going to end this world." "No," Irisa said, voice quiet. "She's going to end the chains that built it." Chapter 19, The Burning Moon Pact. The winds howled like mourning wolves around the summit of Bloodstone Peak. The ancient altar loomed ahead, stone blackened by centuries of blood rites, its jagged edges etched with runes that pulsed faintly red beneath the rising blood moon. Seren Val stood barefoot before it, her silver hair tangled and wild, her skin streaked with ash, cuts, and drying tears. In her hands, she held the heart of her betrayal, the broken sigil core torn from Damon's back. She hadn't stopped running since the night of the mark. Not when her legs gave out. Not when her lungs clawed for air. Not when her heart screamed at her to turn back and let herself be claimed. Tonight, that heart would be silenced. The blood moon crested the edge of the sky, staining the world crimson. Shadows twisted and writhed on the stone beneath her feet. She stepped into the center of the altar's circle, lifting the core toward the sky. The moment it touched moonlight, it ignited, burning not with fire, but memory. A voice rose behind her. Sharp, bitter. "So this is your idea of salvation?" Cale Thorne stepped from the shadows, his cloak billowing in the wind. His eyes gleamed not with hatred, but pity, worse somehow. "You're a fool, Seren." She didn't look at him. "I'd rather be a fool than a pawn." He laughed, a short, humorless thing. "Is that what you think this is? That you're choosing freedom? That bleeding out on a forgotten altar makes you free?" "I'm ending it," she said. "I'm ending him. The tether, the command, the legacy. No one will ever be forged into a blade again. Not by the Rhask name. Not by the council. Not by anyone." "You're not ending him," Cale said, stepping closer. "You're ending yourself." "And for what?" "For a lie you don't even understand." She turned then, face flushed with fury. "What lie?" Cale met her gaze, quiet for a beat. Then he said, "Damon Rhask is the alpha you were promised as a child." The world tilted. Seren swayed. "You're lying. You think I'd bother? His tone was weary now. You think I wanted this? To watch you grow up in silence, knowing the one you cursed and the one you longed for were the same soul split down the middle. No, her voice fractured. No, that's not possible. The Damon I met was cruel, ruthless. And the one you dreamed of was kind, gentle. Taught you to climb cliffs and whispered poetry into your hair under a dying sun. Kale's expression softened, crueler than before. Same soul. Two paths. The curse of the Rhask bloodline, fractured in spirit to bear the weight of power no alpha was ever meant to carry. Seren took a step back, her breath coming ragged. Then why tell me now? Because you're about to kill the only person who ever truly saw you. Behind them, the mountain groaned, stone trembling beneath the blood moon's pull. And with it, another presence surged over the altar like a breaking tide. Damon. He appeared in a rush of wind and shadow, chest heaving, bloodied shirt torn open where the sigil once pulsed. His golden eyes found her instantly. And for a moment, just a moment, she saw both men in him. The cold fury and brutal precision of the Alpha who had claimed her throat in battle. The boy who carved her name into a willow tree with trembling hands. Seren, he said, but it came out fractured. Because something was wrong. His voice split, echoing, one syllable in his voice, the other in another's. The air around him shimmered, warped, then burst outward. A second figure emerged behind him, not a body, but a projection. A phantom of his other half. The idealized mate she once believed in, now made manifest by the blood moon's madness. Two Damons. One of memory, one of pain. Both bound to her. The phantom stepped forward. You don't have to die, Seren. Come with me. We can start again. Her body turned toward him without thought, drawn by the softness she hadn't seen in so long. Behind him, the Real Damon stood silent. Watching. Bleeding. No, she whispered. You're not real. The phantom smiled. But I'm everything you wanted. And everything that broke her, Damon said, his voice a gravel rasp. I did this. Don't let him finish it. The altar's glow grew. The runes flared to life, searing red hot. Seren's hands shook as she lifted the knife from her belt. I can't let either of you win. You mean you can't let yourself choose, Kale murmured. Tears ran freely now. Her voice barely held. If I choose, I destroy one of you. If I don't, you destroy each other. She looked up at the moon, at the swelling, burning god I watching from above. I was forged to be a weapon. My blood carries the code to bind and break alphas. If I sever the line here now, there's no going back. Damon stepped forward, shaking. Let me bear it with you. She smiled at him then. Soft. Final. I already gave you everything I had. And before the phantom could reach her, before Damon could cross the last few steps, Seren plunged the knife into her own chest. It slid between bone like silk, straight into the heart. Blood spilled over the altar, igniting the runes. The sigil core shattered in her other hand, sparks of red gold flame dancing up into the night like the last breath of a star. The phantom shrieked, dissolving into smoke and memory. Damon fell to his knees with a sound no wolf should ever make. Kale turned away. Above them, the blood moon burned brighter than it had in 1,000 years, and then began to fade. The old order undone. The girl they had tried to turn into a key, a knife, a crown. Gone. And somewhere in that silence, a new howl rose. Not in grief, but in beginning. Chapter 20, When the Pain Still Knows Your Name. The snow fell like ash from a dying star. It swept across the fractured summit where the bloodstone peak had once risen, its obsidian bones now shattered, sundered by the blast that had undone the very laws of the pact. No longer did the moon burn red above, but a fading, weeping silver as if the sky itself mourned what had transpired. At the center of the ruin, buried beneath smoking stone and blood-stained frost, Damon Rhask stirred. He had no words for pain anymore. Pain was not a sensation, but a state of being, woven into each breath that scraped his torn lungs, stitched into the way his ribs shifted jaggedly with every twitch. He had not screamed during the blast, had not even known when the altar exploded in light and heat and memory. All he knew now was silence. Bone-deep, soul-rupturing silence. Until it whispered, "She's still there." Not as a voice, not even as an echo, but as ache. A particular throb behind his sternum that pulsed with a familiarity too raw to belong to anything but her. Seren. The name hurt more than the wounds that kept him pinned. Because it still meant something. Because despite all that had shattered, her name, breathed in agony, had survived. He tried to move. His right arm didn't answer. Crushed beneath some monolith of debris. His left hand trembled, fingers curling in the snow as if to claw his way not out of the ruin, but toward something. Someone. She's cold. He felt it, not with skin or sense, but with that cursed connection neither death nor broken soul marks had managed to sever. She was cold. And fading. He didn't think of what it meant. Didn't think of broken ribs puncturing lungs, or that each motion made the world tilt black. He thought only of her, and of the way she looked when the light took her. Hair like bleeding starlight. Eyes full of goodbye. Lips forming the last lie she'd tell. This is the only way. He dragged himself forward. Each inch was its own crucifixion. His knees carved trails of blood into the snow. His breath came in wet gasps, the scent of iron thick in his throat. The world spun, but the pain kept him rooted. Anchored. It knew her name. It sang it in every nerve. He found her at last beneath the twisted remains of the altar. She lay curled, hands folded over her chest like some ancient relic awaiting the sky's forgiveness. The snow had begun to gather on her lashes. Her skin bore the shimmer of what was left of her transformation, half divine, half destroyed. Lines of light still veined across her arms, fading with every heartbeat. Damon collapsed beside her. For a moment, he couldn't even cry. His body refused him that mercy. So he leaned in, pressed his forehead to hers, and with lips cracked and bloodied, he whispered, "The pain's still here. So you must be too." No answer. But a flicker of memory uncoiled behind his eyes, her smile, crooked and stubborn. The way she used to touch his wrist when no one watched. How she used to listen, not to the words he said, but to the things he never spoke. That Damon, the boy who'd once knelt before her in moonlight, whose spirit had been split to serve prophecy, was gone. And the phantom she'd created to mourn him, to anchor her resolve, had vanished in the burst of divine rupture. Now only he remained. He took her hand. Cold, but not yet stiff. She said she'd kill the bond, he muttered, voice cracking. But the bond's not in the ink. Not in the mark. It's in the ache. And I still ache, Seren. The wind howled low across the snow fields. Like morning. Like a lullaby from something too old to forget. He pressed his cheek to hers. You told me once that love isn't about being chosen. It's about staying when it hurts. He coughed, a shudder breaking through him. Blood stained her skin where he touched it. I stayed, he said, so softly he wasn't sure if he imagined it. And now I hurt. So badly. Which means you're here. Which means you never left. For a moment, he imagined she stirred. Not in body, but in breath. A tremble at the corner of her lips. Or maybe it was the wind again. But he wrapped his arms around her, holding her to him like a man who had nothing left to believe in but pain. And pain, at least, was faithful. When his eyes finally closed, it wasn't sleep that came, but silence. But not the kind that forgets. The kind that waits. Years passed. The snow buried what remained of Bloodstone Peak, blanketing it into a ghost of memory. Ashrend, once a city of vows, crumbled into wind-blown stone. But stories still wandered the outer wilds. Stories of a silver she-wolf who did not howl, but sang, a song without words, so hollow it made even alphas flinch. She roamed the Ashrend forest during the blood moon. Always alone. Always just ahead of any who followed. And when the moon turned its reddest, when the sky opened in that same burnt bloom from years past, a second wolf came. A black one, eyes gold bright with ruin. He never howled, never chased. He simply found the silver wolf, sat beside her, and did not move. They would stay there until the moon faded. Two ghosts. Or perhaps, two hearts that still remembered how to ache. Chapter 21. The Silence After the Howl. The third dawn broke like a blade over Ashrend. Pale light slid across the jagged bones of what had once been towers and spires, now reduced to blackened ribs of stone jutting from ice-packed earth. Snow fell without sound. No howls answered it. No one did. The wind was the only voice left in the ruins. Beneath a broken ledge where blood had once painted sacred symbols, Damon Rhask stirred. His body was a ruin of itself, spine cracked, ribs sunken, flesh torn by the detonation of the divine mark. Yet breath came. Shallow, ragged, unwanted. His first instinct was to scream. But no pain came. No searing thread along his spine. No shared torment. No burn across the bond like fire-licking bone. Just absence. His cracked lips parted. Seren. The name was a broken prayer, and it did not echo. He tried again. The second time, his voice was barely more than breath. Seren. Still nothing. He pushed against the rubble with hands half splintered, dragging himself inch by inch toward where the bloodstone had fallen. The ground was charred in a perfect ring around the crater. His skin, where it touched that circle, sizzled and split. But he kept moving. Something in him still believed she was there. Some thread of instinct howled that she hadn't truly left, not all the way. He reached the center. There was no body. Only her torn cloak caught on a shard of obsidian, stained silver-blue by godfire. Only that, and a faint smell of pine and starlight that hadn't yet faded. He pressed his forehead to the stone, and the snow hissed against his fevered skin. His voice cracked like ice under pressure. I don't feel you anymore. He waited. Nothing. No pulse in the mark. No phantom ache. No thread drawn tight between their souls. The pain was gone. But the pain had been her. 3 days passed. Ashrend fell into a deeper silence. The snow refused to melt. No one howled. No alpha roared commands into the void. The link that once held the minds of wolves together, tethered by instinct and blood oaths, had vanished. Damon could feel the gap where it used to be, an empty socket in the core of him. He wandered the ruins like a shadow. Wolves cowered at his approach, not from fear, but from the hollowness he carried like a cloak. The strongest had gone feral. Without marks to bind them, instincts tore free. Some turned on each other. Others fled, howling at moons that no longer sang back. Damon only watched. His own pack didn't approach. Not even Kaelin, who had once stood beside him through a dozen wars. None of them knew what to say to a man whose pain had defined him. They feared what he had become now that it was gone. He stood at the highest peak of the Bloodwatch Tower, now half collapsed. From here, he could see the full breadth of the devastation. The godprint still smoldered, even under snow. The air there shimmered unnaturally, like it still remembered her shape. Why did it take you? His voice was hoarse, low. No answer. Why you and not me? Wind. Ash. Silence. He let his head fall forward, bracing on the stone ledge. His thoughts began to unravel. Once, the bond between them had burned with such violence he thought it would consume him. Her agony was his agony. Her gasps, her tremors, her broken cries in the night, they had echoed in his chest, pressed under his ribs, made his bones sing. He had hated it. He had loved it. Because it was hers. Because it meant she was real. Now, he felt nothing. And nothing was the most unbearable pain of all. He whispered into the snow, I already survived hell. I don't want to survive this. Irisa Crow emerged from shadow like a wraith cloaked in snow-matted velvet. Her golden hair was bound in braids heavy with steel pins, signs of mourning, of power reclaimed. She walked as if she had already claimed dominion over the silence. Damon didn't turn when she stopped behind him. "It's done," she said softly. He said nothing. The godmark is broken. The bond system collapsed with it. All ties severed. Still, nothing. Iris's gaze narrowed. "We can rebuild. Not with that girl's chaos. But with order. With selection. With wolves of pure blood, unmuddled by emotion." His voice was dust. She wasn't chaos. Irisa laughed. Cold and flat. She was poison. A girl with a human heart who thought she could carry the godprint. She thought pain made her divine. She thought you, she spat the word, were the proof. Damon turned then. Slowly. His face was dead calm. She was the only real thing in this world. Irisa's jaw twitched. "I can give you purpose again," she said. "We can make pain irrelevant. We can make loyalty scientific. No more weak-blooded wolves. No more collapsing orders." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you know what hurts the most?" She stiffened. "What?" "I don't feel it anymore." He turned back to the snow. "That's how I know she's gone." Kaelin found him the next day, crouched at the edge of the god's car, staring into a patch of ice that shimmered like starlight. "There's a pulse in the mark," Kaelin said quietly. "It's not gone. Just buried." Damon's voice was ragged. "Buried where?" "I don't know." Silence. "But it's still resonating." "Barely. I felt it during the blood moon." Damon didn't move. "Her soul might not be completely extinguished." "I can't feel her." "That doesn't mean she's not somewhere." Another long silence. Then Kaelin said, softer, "You were the only one who could bear the full weight of her pain. Maybe you still can." Damon's hands curled slowly at his sides. "If she still exists," he said, almost to himself, "even if it's only in echoes, I will find her." Kaelin nodded. "Then that's the new war." That night, when all was still, Damon sat alone by the ruins of the altar where the godprint had first been carved. He closed his eyes. And in the moment before sleep took him, something flickered. A ghost of a sensation. Barely more than a breath across his mind. Cold fingers against his chest. A whisper, perhaps only imagined. "You were the only one who knew how to hurt me." That's how I knew it was love. Then, nothing. But he did not move for hours. Just sat, waiting for the silence to break. Chapter 22, The Memory That Refuses to Fade. The ash never settled in Ashrend. 3 nights had passed since the blood mark exploded like a second sun, since the scar of the gods opened and swallowed every thread that once bound wolf to wolf. The ruins still breathed heat in places, the stone blackened and blistered like an open wound, the wind moving through what was left of the broken towers like it had forgotten the language of howls. Damon Rhask had not slept. He sat beneath the crumbled arch of what was once the Dawn Tower, its silver watch glyphs cracked into spiderwebs across the stone. His palms were bloodless. His nails had long since torn from clawing through the rubble in the first night, trying to find something, anything, that still pulsed with the scent of her. He'd found nothing. The silence was worse than pain. In the hours after the explosion, he'd screamed until his throat gave out, until no sound remained but the faint gurgle of wind against glassed earth. Now there was only a void. The bond that once seared along his spine, wild and cruel and alive, was gone. Not severed. Not asleep. Gone. Damon curled forward, pressing his forehead to the dust-choked stone. His voice cracked when it finally surfaced. "She's not here." No one answered. No Alpha. No Pack. No Tether. But something else stirred. It came first as a shimmer, a cold flicker against the air, and then the slow distortion of reality. The ruin bent, stone becoming smoke, and smoke becoming shadow, until the tower dissolved into a void of memory. He didn't move. The dream came like it always did now, no warning, no mercy. He stood again in the shattered halls of the blood shrine, younger, smaller, and trembling. In his hands, a silver cord. Before him, a girl, her silver hair soaked in flame and moonlight. Her eyes, already red from crying. Seren. No, not Seren. Sanbaya. In the dream, she didn't look at him. She never did. Her hands trembled as she pressed the blade to her own chest. No, he whispered, reaching forward. Don't do this. Not again. But he couldn't move faster than the dream. The blade fell. Blood sprayed. And the scream that left her mouth was not human, not wolf, something deeper. Something ancient. He lunged. Too late. She crumpled like petals caught in frost. Smoke poured from her body, the echo of burning bones rising around him. Don't die for me again, he begged, falling to his knees beside her, fingers pressing over wounds that already healed wrong in other lives. Don't do this again. But she never answered. Not once in 100 nights. He woke gasping. Except he hadn't moved. He was still in the dream. Still in the bleeding shrine, only now, something had changed. A shadow stood behind the girl's falling body. Cloaked, elegant, cold. Irisa. Damon's breath caught in his throat. She moved like a priestess, gliding past the memory like she didn't belong, like she was observing, altering. Her hands glowed faintly as she reached for the dying girl's head, whispering something he couldn't hear. What are you doing? He snarled, rising to his feet. Get out of this. But his voice didn't echo. His feet didn't move. He wasn't real here. None of this was. And Irisa didn't stop. Her fingers brushed the girl's temple, her lips moving. The dream began to shift. The fire stilled. The blood retracted. Sanbaya rose again, now composed, distant, her face empty. No grief. No pain. No voice. Only a mirror. Reflecting back what Irisa wanted her to be. No, Damon breathed. You can't remake her. You can't hollow her out. But the dream obeyed Irisa now. The past twisted around her will. He stumbled back as the shrine crumbled and rebuilt. Ash became marble. The scent of blood became incense. A temple not of mourning, but control. She was rewriting her. Weaponizing her. He screamed. And then the dream cracked. A different memory forced its way through. Not the shrine. Not Irisa. But a winter field. A fire. A boy with golden eyes watching a girl walk away through the snow. His hands trembled. He knew that memory. Knew it like he knew the pain between breaths. Sanbaya. The name dropped like a stone in water. The whole world trembled. And then she stopped. The girl in the dream, his dream, turned for the first time in all the cycles of madness. Her eyes met his, green and burning. You still remember, she whispered. He staggered. I never forgot. She stepped closer. Her bare feet left no prints in the snow. You were the boy, she said. The one I killed. You. I'm the one who let you, he said, voice breaking. Because I loved you even then. Silence fell again. But it was not empty this time. It rang with her memory. It pulsed with grief. She reached out and touched his chest. Her fingers burned where his heart once broke. Then maybe we can still find each other. Even across death. He sobbed. Not like a wolf. Not like a king. Like a boy who had died too many times. I'm still yours, he said. Even without the mark. Even without the howl. I am yours, Sanbaya. Her image began to fade. She smiled through her tears. Then find me. And she vanished. When Damon opened his eyes again, he was in the ruin. The ash was cold now. The moon above silent. But something new throbbed in his chest. Not a bond. Not a mark. A memory. And that memory refused to fade. Chapter 23, Wolves Without Chains. The ash never stopped falling. It drifted through the skeletal ruins of Ashrend like pale snow, silent and thick, coating the shattered bones of what once was. In the heart of the white-cloaked ruin, where the remnants of a once glorious citadel loomed half swallowed by frost and time, a flicker of movement broke the stillness. Voices rose in the white bone hall. The makeshift sanctuary, cobbled together from scorched columns and melted iron veining the marble floor, housed wolves no longer willing to obey the old ways. Their faces were worn thin by famine and fire, by grief too long carried in silence. There were omegas who bore broken link scars across their throats, alphas who refused to scent mark, betas whose eyes stayed open through every meeting now, no longer docile, no longer content with silence. Kalen stood at the center of it all. His hair had grown long and unbound, wild around his shoulders. No crown, no mark, no weapon. Only his voice remained, sharp and cold as the frost lining the broken windows. "We could not rebuild the world with the chains that broke it," he said, voice echoing through the marble corpse of the hall. "Without the bond, we are beasts," one of the elders growled, lips curled, the remains of his alpha sigil tattooed in ink now peeling. "Without order, we return to rutting and slaughter." Kalen didn't flinch. "Then let us be beasts who choose each other." A murmur rippled through the gathered. It had been weeks since the fall of the Blood Garden, months since Seren vanished into snow and flame. Her name was not spoken, but she had become a ghost that stalked their sleep. In their dreams, she knelt in silence before the last wall of the palace, blood-streaked and pale, eyes closed, lips parted in a prayer no one could hear. Not begging, not raging, just kneeling. The memory had no scent, no bond. And yet it burned. She was an omega, someone whispered. She was the end of all bonds, another muttered. Kalen's gaze sharpened. She was the beginning of choice. Outside the hall, the wind howled through the blackened pine. Snow wrapped itself around the fallen spires of Ashrend like a mourning shroud. And far from the voices and the firelight, Damon Rhask stood alone beneath the scorched tree line, where nothing stirred but ghosts. He didn't come to the gatherings. He didn't speak of the war or of her. He barely spoke at all. His cabin, if one could call it that, was little more than a hollowed stone basin in the ice, built beside the ruins of an old observatory tower. Every full moon, his howls cracked the sky. Not loud, not wild, but hoarse. Broken. On other nights, he carved bones. The wolves called her the imprint saint now. The one who took pain without striking back. Who bore every lash and heat mark and psychic burn without unleashing the ruin she'd been marked for. But Damon never called her that. He never said her name. Not once. Not even when the snow piled in drifts above his door. Not even when the dreams came clawing. She came to him in fragments. A tilt of her head. The scar beneath her jaw he'd kissed once, only once. The way her lips had moved around the word mine like it was made of glass. In his dreams, she didn't die again. She just looked at him, waiting. He always woke up before she spoke. Always with a torn throat, and sheets damp with sweat, and claws embedded in the stone floor. He'd stopped trying to tell if the blood was from his palms or his chest. And when Kalen came, silent as always, he didn't rise. He didn't need to. "You're avoiding her," Kalen said, brushing snow from his shoulders as he sat on the cold stone ledge opposite. "I buried her," Damon said, low and flat. "That's not the same thing." Kalen didn't argue. "You saw her too?" "In dreams." Kalen nodded. "I think we all do." "She wasn't a prophet," Damon snapped. "She was a girl with no choice." "She made one," Kalen said. "That's what changed us." Damon's laugh cracked like ice. "I'm not here to make a shrine of her. Or write her into some myth so we feel better about surviving." Kalen's voice softened. "No. You're here because you still love her." Damon looked away. "She asked you to mark her," Kalen said, not cruelly. "And you did. But only halfway. You bound her pain to yours, Damon. Not her soul." Damon's throat tightened. "She didn't ask me to save her." "She didn't need saving," Kalen said. "She needed someone who wouldn't walk away." The silence stretched like a knife's edge. "She's still looking for you," Kalen murmured. "That's why the dreams won't stop." "I don't deserve them," Damon said finally. "I let her die. She chose to die. Because of me. Because of all of us," Kalen corrected. but she didn't regret it. That's the difference. The fire crackled low in the iron basin. She wanted to tear the bond apart, Kaelin said. And she did. You can either mourn her for the rest of your lives, or you can finish what she started. Damon looked up. His eyes were dull gold now, not the burning ember they once were. What if I don't want to finish anything? Then she'll keep kneeling in your dreams until the end of your life, Kaelin said simply. And you'll never know if she would have turned around. The snow howled again. Kaelin rose to leave. At the door, he turned. She's not gone, he said. But her spirit's wandering. And it's only going to stop if you decide. Decide what? Kaelin's voice was a whisper. Whether to let her die, or go with her. And then he was gone. Damon sat there long after the snow buried Kaelin's footprints. In the dark, he reached for the small carving he'd hidden under the furs. It was unfinished. The curve of her neck, the line of her collarbone. No face yet. No eyes. He pressed his forehead to it. And for the first time since the fire, he whispered, Seren. The snow kept falling. But somewhere far away, in the deep dream layers where wolves no longer ruled and marks held no sway, a girl turned her head. And began to cry. Chapter 24. The Ghost of Her Pain. The snow had swallowed everything. Damon stumbled through it, each breath drawing razors into his chest. The cold wasn't physical. It was older than skin, deeper than blood. A hollowness that whispered through his marrow as he collapsed at the edge of the forgotten veil. The last thing he remembered was the burn behind his eyes. The echo of her name rippling through his ribs like a cracked bell. Then, silence. And then, water. He opened his eyes to a mirror lake that breathed without ripples. A sky too still, too heavy with stars that didn't blink. Trees that grew upside down, roots tangled in the firmament. And in the center of it all, a figure kneeling at the water's edge, her silver hair spread across the glassy surface like a bloodless wound. Seren. Damon tried to call out, but his voice was a memory only. No sound left his mouth. He stepped forward and watched, horrified, as his body passed soundlessly through the reflection. His boots didn't disturb the lake. His shadow didn't touch her. He wasn't real. A specter. A shard. Across the lake, Seren's fingers trembled as she unfastened the collar of her torn shift, baring her clavicle. The ghost of the old mark glimmered faintly there, like a bruise half-healed, half-haunted. She raised a glass blade, not conjured, not imagined, but ritualistic in its precision. Her face was calm, tearless, terrifying. No, Damon moved closer, his hands outstretched, futile. Seren, stop. She couldn't hear him. The blade bit into her skin. It wasn't rage that tore through him this time. It was terror. He screamed, or tried to. The sound fractured inside his throat like a dying star. She carved carefully, precisely, tracing the broken lines of the old Alpha seal. Not to renew it. Not even to sever it. She was redrawing pain into a symbol. One that said, I belong to no one. Except, she still belonged to him. His soul convulsed. Please, please, not like this, he whispered, collapsing to his knees just a breath away from her spectral form. Then the mirror lake rippled. A second presence entered the dream. Irisa stepped from the shadows of the silver trees, her hands cupped around a flickering blue flame. It hissed as she neared the bleeding girl, casting unnatural light on Seren's exposed shoulders. She's too fractured, Irisa murmured, not to Damon, not even to Seren, but to the void that listened. Too bound by sorrow. But sorrow can be cleansed. Fire knows how to reshape what water cannot. She knelt behind Seren, pressing the flame toward the wound. Damon's scream finally broke free. Don't touch her. They heard him now. Seren flinched, turning her head slightly as if she'd caught a trace of his breath. Irisa froze, her eyes narrowing. You are not meant to be here, she said sharply. You're nothing but a discarded echo. I'm enough. Damon stood, his body flickering at the edges, every movement threatening to unravel. Even if I'm only half a soul, I will not let you erase her. This is not your choice anymore. Irisa placed the flame onto Seren's shoulder. It licked at her skin, not burning, not scarring, but branding in light. Seren gasped. And then Damon was there, truly there, as if her pain had summoned what was left of him. He reached out and touched her back. His hand didn't pass through. He felt her. And she turned. Tears clung to her lashes now, not falling, just held there like stars, too proud to die. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. This is my burden. You think I wouldn't carry it with you, he choked out. I'm not trying to die, she said, almost gently. I'm trying to give you your life back. He couldn't breathe. The lake darkened around them, stars blinking out. Seren. I gave you everything once, she whispered. Even the part of me that still wanted to scream. This is me letting you go. I don't want to be let go, he said, voice shaking. I want to burn with you. I want to drown in your sorrow if it means you're still you. Even if it breaks me. Irisa stepped back, something unreadable tightening her face. You always were a fool for her, she muttered. Damon looked at her. No, he said. I was just too afraid to admit what I was willing to lose. He turned back to Seren. You don't have to carry this alone, he said. Not your pain. Not your guilt. Not your memories. Especially not your love. She looked at her hands, bloodless, shaking, scarred with both dreams and truth. You would stay, she asked. Even if I never heal? I would bleed beside you, he said. Every full moon. Every night you forget who you are. Every dawn you remember. I'll be there. For the first time, her lips curved. It wasn't quite a smile. It was something smaller. Something holy. Then the mirror cracked. A line split the lake from end to end, like a scar rediscovered. The trees shattered into light. The stars rained down, too bright to be anything but memories. Irisa vanished, consumed in her own silence. And the two of them were left standing in the ruins of the dream. Hand in hand. The dream fell inward like a lung exhaling. And when Damon opened his eyes again, he was no longer in the snow. He was in firelight. But it wasn't the night he remembered. It was the night. Sacrifice night. The air reeked of incense and ash. The red moon hung above like a watching god. He turned. Seren stood at the altar once more, her wrists bound in ceremonial ribbons, her eyes wide and terrified. And this time, he was not too late. Chapter 25, If I Had Chosen You. The moon was red again. Not just crimson, but blood deep, the kind that turned rivers to rust and shadows to old regrets. Damon stood barefoot on the scorched soil of Bloodmoon Hollow, his breath catching against air that smelled of ash and forgetfulness. Around him, dream lavender trees curled into themselves, like hands retreating from a burn. He knew this place. The blood-choked valley. The stone altar that shimmered not with dew, but dried prayers and unspoken endings. It was the night he had bled out a future he never lived. It was the night Seren chose to break them both. And now, here it was again. The time-worn scene unraveling with dreamlike fidelity, but not quite memory. This wasn't his mind reliving, it was something else. Something truer than memory. A loop that pulsed with fate's terrible precision. Footsteps. He turned. Seren stood just beyond the twisted arch of bones and wildflower thorns, her hair lifted by a wind that didn't exist. She was barefoot like she had been then, the edges of her ceremonial shift soaked in silver water and darker things. In her hand, the ceremonial dagger, etched with gods neither of them had ever believed in, gleamed like gilt in moonlight. Her lips trembled. Damon. He stepped forward, but the ground pulsed beneath his feet, anchoring him. No, he wasn't meant to interfere. Not yet. Another version of himself stepped from the fog. Younger. Leaner. With eyes too heavy for their age. That Damon walked straight into the circle and knelt. Do it, he said. I won't flinch this time. Seren flinched for both of them. She raised the dagger. Her breath hitched. The scene froze not in time, but in resolve. And in that pause, the dream cracked. Because Damon, the present Damon, moved. He stepped forward, ignoring the way his limbs faded into spectral dust, and reached for her hand. This time, his fingers touched hers. Not flesh to flesh, but soul to soul, like old cords finding each other again after centuries of silence. Her eyes widened. "You don't have to," he whispered. "I don't want you to live with this again. Not this time." She shook her head, tears spilling freely. "This is how it has to end. It's the only way to unbind us." He smiled, but it was the kind that broke things. "Then let it end differently. Let me be the one who dies with choice, not consequence." Her hand trembled violently. "You can't. I already did. 100 ways. 1,000 regrets." His voice cracked. "But this time, I choose to die in front of you, not behind you." She stared at him like he had just undone every law of the gods. He moved her hand gently, guiding the dagger not to his chest, but away, up, skyward, where the blood moon pulsed like an open wound in the heavens. "I won't let this curse keep feeding on your guilt." She sobbed. "Why do you always hurt first?" she cried, collapsing into his arms. He wrapped his arms around her so tightly it felt like stitching a soul back together. "Because when you hurt," he said softly, "I know I'm still alive. I know I still love you." The dagger slipped from her fingers. She didn't let go of him. Not this time. And then came the rupture. The red moon cracked in half. The sky screamed like metal torn from the roots of the world. Around them, the hollows shimmered and buckled, crumbling under the weight of broken time. From the edges of the dream, whispers echoed, fragments of the vow they'd never completed. "If I had chosen you. If I had loved myself enough to stay. If you had turned around before the blade fell." She kissed his mouth like she was drowning in his absence. And then she turned the dagger, not to him, not to herself, but to the sky. And through it. The moment it struck the stars, the dream erupted. The world shattered into 1,000 mirror shards, each one showing a version of their unfinished love. Damon screamed her name as the ground vanished beneath them both. And then, darkness. Not death. Not ending. But a silence so absolute it hummed. Then came the pain. Not the ache of the soul, but the cruel snap of ribs, the wet sting of blood, the weight of something, someone, against his chest. His eyes opened. Reality blinked into focus. He was lying beneath the shadow of the bloodstone monoliths. The altar had crumbled. The ritual had failed. Or been rewritten. In his arms, Seren lay limp, her skin pale but warm, her breath shallow but present. Still alive. His heart cracked open. "Seren," he whispered, brushing hair from her face with trembling fingers. "You came back." Her lips parted. "I never left." Chapter 26, The Heart That Doesn't Forget. The wind that swept across Ashrend was no longer cruel. It was tired, gritty with the ash of fallen strongholds, silent with the dust of crumbled empires. Beneath a fractured sky and a horizon burned to embers, two bodies lay still among blood-drenched stones, unmoving but not lifeless. Damon Rhask's arms were wrapped around her as if the whole world still wanted to take her away. He didn't speak. He barely breathed. One hand clutched the back of her neck, his fingers splayed in a trembling prayer against her fevered skin. Blood pooled beneath them, some of it hers, more of it his. Seren stirred. At first, it was just a twitch, a flutter of breath, a whisper against the torn fabric of his collar. Then her fingers curled weakly in the front of his cloak, grasping for the world she thought she'd lost. "I dreamed," she murmured hoarsely. Damon didn't answer. His eyes were open but dim, mouth parted as if still trapped between planes. "I saw you," Seren whispered again, blinking slowly. "And you weren't running. You were just there." His grip tightened. She shifted, every muscle aching like her bones had been shattered and reassembled with memory in place of marrow. The pulse of the blood moons still throbbed in the distance, casting a red haze across the wreckage. And yet, amid it all, she could feel him, not his scent, not his command, but the weightless, devastating presence of Damon Rhask beside her. Inside her. "You're still here." Her voice cracked, breaking apart the silence that had held them captive all night. "I can't feel the bond. But I can feel you." A breath escaped his lips. Not a word, but not nothing. Relief, maybe? Or surrender. She turned her head, pressing her forehead to his chest. His heartbeat was slow, staggered, struggling, and yet it was there, steady enough to echo. "You're hurt," she said. A pause. Then his voice, barely audible. "You woke up." She nodded against him. He laughed. It was broken, wet, painful. "I didn't think I'd get to hear you again." "Not really." She didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't say thank you. She just lay against him as the stars bled into dawn, letting silence mend what screams had broken. Time became something warped between them, stretched like string pulled too tight, ready to snap but never daring to. Somewhere behind them, Ashrend's last walls collapsed into the dust. The war was over, but their exile had only just begun. Kalen found them when the sky turned gray. He approached slowly, his once golden armor scorched black, his jaw set like stone. Behind him trailed a handful of survivors, some clan, some not. No banners flew now. No emblems remained. He crouched beside them, gaze passing over Damon's ruined shoulder, the dried blood at Seren's temple, the strange stillness between their bodies. "You both should be dead," he said simply. Seren didn't answer. Neither did Damon. "But you're not." He glanced toward the shattered bloodmark sigil, still faintly glowing in the soil behind them, and then back. "Do you know what you've done?" Kalen asked. Damon's lips curled faintly. "Broken the cycle." Kalen tilted his head, dark amusement flickering in his exhausted expression. "More than that. Your spirits, your bonds, they didn't just fuse. They adapted. There's no Alpha here anymore. No Omega. No hierarchy." Seren sat up slowly, leaning against Damon's good side. "Then what are we?" "Symbiotic," Kalen said. "Equal. One bleeds, the other feels it. One lives, the other suffers. It's not a bond. It's a mirror with no end." Damon looked at Seren then, eyes half-lidded but clear. "Do you regret it?" "No," she whispered. "I only regret not choosing you sooner." He exhaled, brow twitching, and leaned his forehead against hers. "Don't start mourning me yet," he muttered. "We still have too much pain left to share." Seren gave a quiet laugh, tears slipping down without a fight. "I remember the way you looked at me," she said, soft as a hymn. "That last time. You were bleeding. I thought you hated me." "I didn't," he murmured. "I was just afraid I'd forget that what I felt was love." And for a moment, neither of them moved. Just breath. Just blood. Just memory clinging to fractured bones and borrowed time. When they finally stood, Ashrend lay behind them like a mausoleum for gods who had broken their own vows. No one told them to go. No one asked them to stay. Kalen met Damon's gaze once more. "You'll be hunted. For what you've become." Damon nodded. "Let them come." Kalen paused. "Seren." She turned. "Are you still fighting?" She met Damon's eyes again. Their hands found each other without thinking. "No," she said. "I'm done fighting." They left as the first light of the sun cracked through the clouds. No declarations. No goodbyes. Just two silhouettes against the ruins, her white cloak dragging in soot, his frame blood-stained and limping, their fingers interlaced like a pact no law could define. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Not when every breath was shared. Every scar remembered. Not when the heart, despite everything, didn't forget. Chapter 27. Wolves Remember in Pain. The wind had no edge here, only weight. It didn't cut, it pressed. Pressed against Seren's lungs, against Damon's healing ribs, against the frail canvas walls of the tent they'd pitched behind a half-buried and abandoned to frost. The Wildfire Lodge, someone had once called it, Now only a shell, a roof to keep them from the snow and silence. Their boots were wet from thawed stream water and half-melted memories. Damon was seated cross-legged near the hearth, the weak flame licking up through the cracks of salvaged wood. He was sharpening a blade that had not seen blood in days. That alone felt like a lie. Seren knelt beside him, her sleeves rolled to the elbow, rubbing balm into the shoulder of a trembling boy, a young alpha whose bite mark had not yet formed, whose every nerve still recoiled when the wind carried too many emotions at once. "You breathe too loud," the boy gasped, flinching from her touch. "It hurts. Why does it feel like my spine is splitting in half?" "Because you were never taught how to carry what doesn't belong to you," Seren said softly. "The pain isn't yours. You're only echoing it." He pressed his fist into his chest. "But it's louder than mine." Seren glanced at Damon. He hadn't looked up, but his sharpening slowed. "That means you're alive," she said. "You hear others. That's not a curse. Just a path you weren't given the shoes to walk." The boy blinked. The shaking slowed. He collapsed against the furs she'd laid out, sweat cooling on his temple. She watched him fall asleep, his breath sinking to the crackle of firewood. Then she stood and wordlessly walked into the outer dark. Damon followed minutes later, not because she called him, but because her absence was a tighter noose than the wind. Outside, the stars were ragged. Torn. Not falling, but trembling as if waiting for something to break. He found her perched on a frost-slicked ledge behind the lodge, eyes fixed on the northern lights churning faintly above. "You shouldn't be standing," she said without looking. "You shouldn't be trying to save everyone," he answered. "But we both keep doing it anyway." She didn't argue. A long silence passed, filled with the sighs of the tundra. "Someone asked again today," Damon said, finally. "The refugee mother from the last camp. She asked if we were mates." Seren's voice was low. "What did you say?" "I asked if it mattered." She turned then. The moonlight painted her in pearl and shadow, half made, half lost. "It does," she whispered. "To them. To you. To me. Then what would you call us?" Damon stepped closer, but not enough to break the cold between them. Seren's lips parted. She shook her head. "There's no word for this. We burned the old names down. What's left is raw and real and doesn't beg for a title." His smile was thin. "So we're just pain?" She touched her wrist. The scar there still pulsed faintly, no longer tied to a pack, no longer marked by ritual or god. Only by choice. Memory. The unerasable kind. "Pain that remembers," she said. The fire behind her eyes had never dimmed, but it was tempered now, steel forged, not shattered. He'd watched her change. Watched the girl who once bled alone in cellars now cradle the fury of others as if it were her own. He stepped forward, finally bridging the last sliver of space. His hand brushed hers. She didn't pull away. "When I dream," she said, "I still see them. The ones who didn't escape Ashrend. Their voices cry through my spine. I can feel their fear, like it's mine. Some nights I wake up screaming, but no sound comes out." He squeezed her fingers. "And then, I reach for you," she said. He kissed her knuckles reverently, like they were the only truth left in a dying world. That night, the wind shifted. The temperature dropped below the bone. Inside the lodge, Damon's fever took him. Seren returned from tending a newborn Omega to find him curled against the hearth, pale, skin slicked with sweat and ice both. His breath came in shallow bursts, and the shivers racked his frame like something inside him wanted out. She knelt beside him, wrapping herself around his frame, sharing her warmth. His skin burned against hers, heat and ice in equal war. She murmured into his ear, "You die again, I won't bring you back." His mouth curled faintly. "Liar." She didn't respond. His hand caught hers, tangled weakly with her fingers. "You said we were pain that remembers. But I want to remember something else, Seren. Something beyond burning." Her breath hitched. "What?" He exhaled. "You. The first time I saw you look at me and didn't flinch. The way your voice sounds when you're not afraid. The taste of your defiance. The way your heart beats, not because you have to, but because you chose to stay alive. She pressed her forehead to his. Then live, she whispered. Live long enough to teach me how to remember those things too. He nodded against her. We'll live. Together. They fell asleep like that, bones against bones, scars aligned. The night held its breath around them. Dawn didn't come, not yet. But the quiet did. And then, at the edge of sleep, a low hum rose in the distance. Deep. Trembling. Seren's eyes snapped open. Damon stirred. They both turned their faces toward the horizon. There, just above the frozen ridge, a sliver of crimson cracked the sky. Not sunlight. Blood moon. Rising again. They rose together, no words exchanged. There was no time left to rest. Only to walk. Only to return. Even wolves remember in pain, but sometimes they remember the way back too. Chapter 28, The Last Thorn. The ruins of Ashrend lay like a half-forgotten scar across the tundra, stone husks mottled with frost and moss, bones of a fallen empire quietly buried under the weight of the wind. Above, the sky was bruised with a rising red moon, its glow diffused in the icy air like blood smeared across glass. On this day, 1 year since the massacre, the scattered threads of a broken people had chosen to gather again. They came in silence, omegas with sunken eyes and unhealed scars, alphas who no longer bared their teeth but flinched at their own shadows. No trumpets. No fires. Just the hollow thump of boots on packed snow, the hush of winter brittle cloaks brushing shoulders. Seren stood on the jagged rise where the old trial stones used to loom, her breath misting between cracked lips. The wind carried the faint smell of singed iron and pine ash, remnants of the offerings lit by those who still believed in rituals. Behind her, Damon stood still as a carved sentinel, his wolf pelt cloak rustling faintly. They've rebuilt the pit, Seren murmured. Damon's gaze followed hers. In the clearing below, a new impression hall had been dug, shallower than the original, shaped more like an open basin than a pit of punishment. At its heart, molten stone shimmered, streaked with stardust ink and the shimmer of marrow powder. It was beautiful. It was raw. They say the new marks are etched without domination, he said. Just memory. Just choice. Pain, Seren corrected, her voice low. They want the stone to remember pain. But not power. Damon nodded. It's a start. The gathered crowd shifted as Kale emerged from the far end, flanked by 2 adolescent alphas still in training leathers. His eyes scanned the crowd and settled on Seren and Damon with something like gratitude. And then came Irisa. She was no longer draped in court colors. Her silks were faded and patched, her hair pinned with bone clasps instead of silver. But she held her chin high, still moved like a queen, and carried a shard of the broken crescent crown around her wrist like it was holy. Have we forgotten who we were? She said, her voice ringing unnaturally clear over the murmuring crowd. Have we sunk so low as to beg forgiveness from those who once belonged beneath our feet? A few flinched. A few turned away. But most stared in stunned silence. Kale stepped forward. No one here is beneath anyone, Irisa. Not anymore. You mistake mercy for weakness, she hissed. You forget what an alpha's command is. Without it, we are nothing but beasts. Damon descended from the rise without a word. His steps were slow, unhurried. Snow cracked beneath his boots. You still dream of obedience, he said, each word quiet but sharp as glass. But you forget that all your commands once led to screams. Look around you. You're alone. Irisa's jaw tightened. You would throw away lineage? Sacred structure. I would throw away the knife that kept carving our hearts open. Damon stopped only a few paces from her. Leave. She hesitated. Her fingers clenched around the crown fragment, and for a moment, she looked ready to speak again, to lash out with words sharp enough to flay. But something in Damon's stillness, his quiet authority, earned not by decree but by surviving pain, made her falter. Irisa turned, and no one moved to stop her. When she disappeared into the broken arch of the old temple's gate, it was as if the wind exhaled. Damon returned to the basin. He stepped forward alone, lowering to his knees beside the impression stone. A blade was handed to him, obsidian hilted and dulled at the edge. Not for blood. For carving. In the silence, he scored the fresh stone. His strokes were slow, deliberate. Each letter chiseled with muscle memory born not of tradition, but lived agony. Let the mark remember pain. Never again shall it command. When he finished, the hall remained quiet for a long time. Seren stepped forward, her pale hair loose against her shoulders, the green in her eyes darkened with shadow. She looked down into the molten shimmer, watching it ripple faintly, as if the stone itself had breath. "I was your cost," she said. Her voice was barely more than a whisper, yet it rang in every ear. "But I was never your blood." A stillness swept the crowd. Some turned away. Some wept. But none contradicted her. Damon reached out and took her hand. His fingers, scarred and calloused, curled around hers with aching gentleness. She didn't look at him, only held tighter as the chill deepened. And then Kale approached, something tucked under his arm. "It's the last of them," he said, unrolling the thick vellum. The final draft of the shared mark. No heirlooms. No hierarchies. Only mutual consent. "It's unsigned." He extended the scroll to them both. "It's yours. To seal or to burn." They did not take it immediately. Seren looked at Damon. His eyes, amber under the torchlight, reflected 1,000 memories. "Do you want to be remembered?" she asked quietly. "I want to be free," he said. She smiled. It was small. Tired. But it was real. "Then maybe," she murmured, brushing her fingers along the scroll's edge, "we leave our names off it. Let pain have its place. But not our chains." Damon kissed her knuckles. "Whatever we leave," he said, "we leave together." And the crowd watched, breathless, as the two walked to the flame at the center of the basin. Seren held the scroll for a moment longer. Then she looked up at the blood moon overhead, its reflection dancing in her eyes. "Wolves remember in pain," she said softly. "But we choose what the pain becomes." She held the scroll over the fire. "And let go." Chapter 29. In this pain, I am yours. The snow had stopped falling hours ago, leaving only a thick silence over the ruins of the old Ing Hall. Moonlight filtered through the splintered beams, scattering across the broken altar and blackened stone like spilled salt. The frost had crept over every surface, sealing the cracks in crystalline stillness. But the cold did not reach them. Seren stood barefoot on the scorched earth of the central chamber, her breath rising in soft, rhythmic clouds. The gray fabric of her cloak had long since fallen away, left beside the threshold like an offering. Her skin glowed pale in the dying firelight, marred only by scars and the faintest tremble of the chill. Across from her, Damon slowly unfastened the clasp at his throat. He hadn't spoken since they stepped inside. There were no marks left on their bodies from the old rites. No ghost glow of ink binding soul to soul. No ceremonial sigils to carry the pain of one into the other. What remained between them now was something rawer, hungrier. A gravity that pulled with no script, no legacy, no prophecy. Only the ruin and the ruinous ache of belonging. When Damon stepped toward her, the floor groaned beneath his weight. She did not flinch. Instead, she reached for him, not with hesitation, but with open palms and naked truth. He took her wrists gently, as if he feared they might vanish. His mouth brushed the inside of her wrist, where once the ink had burned symbols of allegiance into her skin. Now, there was only warmth. Flesh. Pulse. "I wanted to give you a world," he said, voice hoarse. "But all I have left is this ruin." She leaned into him, forehead to chest, her fingers digging into the coarse fur at his shoulders. "Then let me burn with you inside it." And then there were no more words. Their mouths found each other like memory, familiar and unfinished. The kiss was not gentle. It was all teeth and breath, hunger and grief. His hands trembled where they gripped her hips. She clawed at his back, nails raking down the length of old scars. The pain was not rejection. It was recognition. He pressed her down into the ash-blackened floor, bare skin against stone still warm from the embers. The cold air wrapped around their bodies, but between them, there was only heat. Their bodies moved with no rhythm but need, no choreography but ache. She arched beneath him as he entered her, a gasp torn from her throat. Pain bloomed. He stilled. She cupped his face between her hands, her thumbs brushing the wetness at his lashes, whether from cold or shame or something older, she couldn't tell. "Don't stop," she whispered. "If it hurts, then we're finally equal." He moved again, slow at first, then with urgency. Every thrust was a breaking, every moan a surrender. There were no commands this time, no ranks, no sacred laws. She wrapped her legs around him, not to trap, but to anchor. When she cried out, it was not in submission, it was in clarity. When he groaned her name, it cracked like stone giving way to roots. They clung to one another as the snow crept through the broken roof, melting against sweat-slicked skin. His mouth moved over her throat, her collarbone, the underside of her jaw. Her nails dragged across his shoulders, down his ribs, leaving red welts that stung in the open air. But still, neither pulled away. He buried his face against her neck and whispered, again and again, "You're here. You're real." And she answered only with the pressure of her lips to his temple, the twist of her hips, the tremble in her voice when she said, "I choose this. I choose you." Their climax was not a peak, but a shattering, a long unraveling that left both of them gasping in the ruins, tangled in one another, trembling with something too vast for name. After, they lay in silence. Her head rested on his shoulder, his arm curled around her back. The embers had long since faded. Cold licked at their limbs, but they did not move. Their bodies were too entwined, too heavy with truth. A single tear slipped from Seren's eye and fell into the hollow where ink had once pooled, now just ash and memory. She whispered, "This wasn't a mark." Damon looked at her. It was a witness. Their fingers laced together. No symbols glowed on their skin. No oath hung in the air. And still, it bound. When morning came, pale and silver blue, they rose slowly, wrapping what remained of their garments around bruised bodies. Snow had gathered in the corners of the Ing Hall, glittering in the dawn. Seren stepped barefoot to the center of the broken altar, where the old ink basin had once bubbled with burning vows. Now it held only ash and water. And in its center, a new thing had begun to grow. A single sprout, silver-veined, crimson-leafed, rose from the blackened pool. Damon knelt beside her, fingers brushing the edge of the basin. It wasn't blessed. Seren smiled faintly. No, it chose to live. He turned to her then, a question forming in his eyes, but she silenced it with a kiss. They did not name it. They did not mark it. But in that moment, as their shadows stretched long across the ruin, it became theirs. Chapter 30, The Thorn Between Their Fangs. The wind on the Ashrend snowfields no longer howled. It sighed. It threaded through the skeletons of long-felled watchtowers, brushed over the cracked bones of wolf stones and prayer pillars. It carried with it no names, no cries, no sense of blood, only a quiet that had outlasted every war, every oath, every kind of belonging that had once been carved into these lands like claw marks in frost. But on the night of the blood moon, they returned. No one saw them come. No one ever did. They did not descend from the mountains in a storm of fury, nor arrive in parades of light like the fabled gods of old. They simply were. From shadow and silver mist, two wolves emerged into the ruined expanse of the old imprint altar, silent, regal, unburdened. One was silver, her coat glinting with ember-touched frost, every movement lithe as if sculpted from fire and snow. The other was darker than the sky above, black as cinder, black as regret, black as the things buried in hearts long silenced. His eyes burned golden beneath the moon, though he never lifted his head. The altar between them had long since crumbled, its basin cracked, its sigil stones worn smooth by decades of wind and snow. But still they came. Still they stayed, until dawn kissed the ridge of the eastern crags and the blood moon melted into a memory no tongue dared speak aloud. "Why do they come back?" they asked. Neither wolf spoke, but neither did they leave. Some believed they were the remnants of a forgotten bond. Others called them gods born too late, too wild to obey the scripts of prophecy or blood. Children whispered tales of cursed lovers. Old priests muttered of heretics. Scholars sought proof in markings and behaviors, archives and ash. But all agreed on one thing: they never bore marks. No crescent scarring the nape, no rune etched on the flank, no shimmer of ancestral symbols glowing beneath fur. No tether, no claim, no law. And yet they never strayed from each other. On nights when snow swallowed the sky and the winds turned cruel, the silver wolf would curl beside the black, her breath a delicate mist against his ribs. She never trembled, even in blizzard, because he would lower his massive frame to shield her every time. His form coiled protectively around hers, not in dominance, but in quiet watch. She slept on his belly, and he did not move. There was no command, no ritual, no spoken vow. Just presence. Enduring. Absolute. Once, a wanderer dared linger through the storm, hoping to sketch what he saw. He returned without ink, with frozen hands, and only a single phrase carved into bone. There the bond no law could bind. Pain was their tether, and pain was their peace. Years passed. Wars rose and fell. New alpha regimes claimed the cities. The Thor-Fell Accords dissolved. The ink of old blood rituals faded. But still, when the red moon rose and the stars bled into the snow's cape, they came, never late, never early. Legends birthed their own names for them. Some called them the Ghost Alpha and the Firefang. Others spoke of the bloodless pair. But most whispered simply, the first unbound. For what they had was not legacy. It was not duty. It was choice. Once, they had burned for each other under cruel moons. Once, they had lain together in ruins, body against body, wounds open, breaths shared, not to mark, not to chain, but to remember. To hold each other not despite pain, but with it. To taste freedom in the agony of being truly seen. And they had vanished after that night. Left no graves. Left no air. Left only silence and the faintest green sprout that bloomed once from the gray ash of the old imprint pool, a single leaf, twined in silver and red, never blooming, never wilting. No one touched it. It was said that should anyone attempt to claim it, the wolves would vanish forever. And so the people let them be. Stories turned to reverence. Reverence into myth. Myth into truth too delicate to speak aloud. But still, those who stayed long enough would see the final image burned into the snow each year. The black wolf curled on stone, unmoving, wind slicing his fur. And the silver wolf asleep atop him, her ear twitching once at the sound of the sky shifting. No chains. No names. No fate they did not shape for themselves. Only this. Only them. Fate was never theirs to serve. They were chosen by none. And still they chose each other. In pain and thorns and freedom.